Okay. So scared. I'm so scared. Hi, I'm Lars and this is my land. In my land, I get to do pretty much whatever I want. And today I'm gonna talk about Yellow Submarine, the album, and why people don't like it. And you're not gonna kill me because it's my land. Okay? I'm not freaking out. I'm not freaking out. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not putting it off. I'm not having my second energy drink for the day. We just need to have an adult conversation about Yellow Submarine. By the way, I'm supposed to tell you to like and subscribe like really early in the video or else you won't do it. Please like and subscribe and comment if you're nasty or fancy. Fancy. We're not family friendly here. Maybe we should just name it like a coward's adult conversation about Yellow Submarine. It's just not that. Doesn't have the zing. We just have to talk because y'all don't like it. I mean, and you're not alone. Lots of people don't like it. Lots of people take issue with the Yellow Submarine album, and for good reason, okay? 12 songs, 6 Beatles, 2 of which we've already heard, 6 instrumentals, George Martin's compositions that were shown on the Yellow Submarine movie, which has been out for about 7 months now. So is it a Beatles album? Is it a soundtrack? What is this? And why? If you're listening to this album for just new Beatles songs, you're listening to 4 songs. Could I have said this in a more confusing way? What I'm trying to say is, if you're buying an album by the Beatles because you're excited about new Beatles songs, there are only 4 new Beatles songs on this album. If you're paying a good amount of money for it, that can be quite a letdown. Is it a legitimate Beatles release? Should it be called an album? What counts at the end of the day? And should that be a point of contention or should we just let it be? That was actually for the first time in my entire fucking YouTube career that I've not said let it be as a pun on purpose. It's just ingrained. I forgot to do memos. Here's memos from a different time. Hi, sorry. Listen, I want to keep this quick today. Please like and subscribe. It helps me so much. It lets me do this, and it honestly helps my feelings. Watch my videos without any sort of restrictions and with extra insanity, sometimes extra hours of stuff at my Patreon, patreon.com/LarsLand. By the way, I made a 7-hour video on the TV show Lost. It is my masterpiece, and it is worth a watch. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. I'm so scared.
I'm not saying
the Yellow Submarine album
was good
or bad.
Do not assassinate me.
I've put out like 40 something videos. I've been unequivocally 1000% positive toward the Beatles. Sometimes I talk about character flaws. Don't ever think I don't have them. I'm just a human being with no discernible talent. So who the hell am I to criticize the Beatles? But I want you to remember that I am, what's the word? Beyond normal. Not extraordinarily, that's not even close. Complimentary about the Beatles. When I first considered this video, I filmed something about it and just put it away for whenever I would get around to a Yellow Submarine video. It's a Beatles project, it's inevitable. There will be a Lars Land deep dive. Before starting this project, before knowing anything about the history of Yellow Submarine, barely anything about the plot of the movie, we have to acknowledge that Yellow Submarine is by far and away the least favorite Beatles album. Like, to the point where people are like, they dismiss it. They remove it from the list because of the circumstances, because of its deficiencies, because of the lack of Beatles participation in the movie, because it's disliked so much that they just don't want to attach it to the Beatles. Is it a matter of comparison that we're looking at the Beatles, their albums, and seeing Yellow Submarine and saying, this can't, we can't? Does it really deserve the flack that it gets? Probably. I highly doubt I'll hate it though. I know myself. As always, when it comes to the Beatles, 100%, here's the rubric.
As usual, your B is another person's A.
When it is a B for the Beatles, it always is an A. I would argue a C for the Beatles is always an A. This is not about whether or not the music is good. I like every song on this album, including the instrumentals. I really do. I have plenty to say about them. It's not about the song. It's about the album, the release, and later a realization about the liner notes. Oh my God, wait, I misread this. Wait, that's so shitty. Wait, that's not cool. That's fucked up. The general vibe of the Beatles' January 1969 album, Yellow Submarine. So I'm going to dig into it, and I'm going to be honest. This video is about the album. I made an extremely long, extremely in-depth, very emotional, very angry video on the Yellow Submarine movie. Mary is going to die. In less than a week, she is gone. What did you want? A handwritten correction from the four Beatles themselves? A full-page spread in the New York Times? You should go watch it, but it's completely independent of this. You don't need to see it to understand what we're talking about here. It's not like I pulled out a scientific study or anything, but I do have stats according to y'all, my YouTube community and my Twitter. And honestly, I didn't count, but I have to say there were 3 that I saw over and over when I asked you guys, what would you consider your least favorite Beatles album? If you had to pick one, what's the one you're listening to the least? Big criticisms, little criticisms, tell me your least favorite. I don't care. The albums I kept seeing over and over again were with the Beatles, Let It Be 1970, so Phil Spector production, and Yellow Submarine, which is what I was expecting. When we get the polling results back, it basically looks like Yellow Submarine is flipping us off, which fair enough. Somebody here won in a landslide and it was Yellow Submarine.
Oh, blue.
It starts with the fact that this album feels really half-assed. And that's because it was. I know nuance is tough these days. However, I think it's important to just kind of look into what the Beatles were doing around this time and maybe what was going on. And if I do what I hope I can do, I will have something fun on the screen. And if I don't, then I will just have text on the screen and I'm sorry. Let's go through the timeline. Yellow Submarine album release, January 13th, 1969. Side note, they're also recording / breaking up / making a new album / documentary Get Back during this time. So let's back it up just a couple months. November 22nd, 1968, the White Album comes out. Back it up a couple more months. July 17th, 1968, Yellow Submarine movie comes out. The Beatles, by the way, were in India from February to March 1st or March 12th, depending on which Beatle you are. Then let's back it up a little bit more. In 1967, they also released Magical Mystery Tour on November 4th in the UK and December 5th in the US, and the movie on Boxing Day in the UK. And of course, on May 26th, 1967, they released Sgt. Pepper. So I know that they're exploring every single type of impossible facet in their brains, but also let's not forget that the Beatles are busy. But I think maybe we should add a few things. In May, they bought the Savile Row building. The Apple businesses, boutiques, fashion, tech, all kinds of things are booming at this point. The Beatles are working in all kinds of industries, tax shelters, whatever. But things are getting really out of hand, out of pocket, out of something. It is chaos. So why not just add some more? Let's add some more. May 3rd, 1968, John Lennon and Yoko Ono record Two Virgins, and famously they do it at sunrise. May 15th, Paul McCartney meets Linda Eastman, and then again on May 19th. July 20th, 1968, Jane Asher and Paul McCartney break up in a very girl boss way. I endorse this. That's a complicated situation, a complicated conversation that I don't think we're ready to have. Not in my land. I mean, not publicly in my land. Just being honest, being real. The dates are a little skewed. I couldn't find an exact date. But in August, John Lennon sues Cynthia Lennon for divorce, claiming that she had an affair with Magic Alex Martis. There's this one scene from the TV show Scrubs. Let's put it right here.
We shaved the baby.
You shaved the baby?
Shaved it.
What's standard procedure? What with the recent outbreak of prenatal lice?
Yep.
Really? Yeah, I'm not buying it. And you two are going to go buy the nursery.
Yeah, I'm not buying it. I believe her. Honestly, I just do. But Cynthia countersues John August 22nd for divorce. John and Yoko are pregnant, and that pregnancy is proof of infidelity. October 25th, 1968, John and Yoko publicly announce their pregnancy. November 8th, 1968, Cynthia Lennon is granted divorce. November 21st, 1968, John and Yoko tragically lose the child in a miscarriage. Lots of things happen over the next several months. March 12th, 1969, Linda and Paul get married, and March 20th, 1969, John and Yoko get married. I would like everyone to forgive me for the incredibly simplified explanation I'm going to offer here in the next seconds. Just trust me, this is a very, very simplified overview. Over these few years, Ringo and Mo are having babies, doing family stuff. Ringo is drinking a lot, drugging a lot, but drinking the most, cheating, and fighting a lot of demons at this point. But ultimately, as a family, the kids were happy. Zach Starkey says that he had never heard his parents yell at each other, even through the divorce. So at this point, they're just having babies. Ringo liked this. This was a good, happy time for him. On the domestic end, simplified. There was lots of bad stuff. Lots of bad, simplified. Chill. And George and Patty are having fertility troubles. Their dynamic is actually really difficult at this time. George is very involved in spirituality, seeking things, which means he wasn't always present for his relationship or really thinking on a scale of what might hurt the people around him. Some of this also encouraged lots of free love and infidelity that Patty was not always on board with. In general, there's a lot going on. Patty is at this time forbade from working, and she's seeking solace in cooking and some other crafts, but, is losing her identity at home, and it is difficult. It is a difficult time for her. Once again, this is a simplification, and I would like to remind everyone that we are talking about the Beatles right now from 1967 to 1969 specifically. I know that there's a lot going on there, but we're talking about this. Thank you. It's pretty clear cut that there were many spinning plates, some being spun by other people, and not always well, and not always with the great intentions. Forgot one. Back up just a little bit. August 27th, 1967, the Beatles' beloved manager, Brian Epstein, died in a really tragic way, which I go into a little bit in the Yellow Submarine movie video and in the Magical Mystery Tour video. Plug in my own stuff. Plug in my own stuff.
Hey. I wonder what would happen if I pull this lever.
You mustn't do that.
Can't help it, I'm a born lever puller.
We're going to talk about the backstory / the production of the album. I started typing something out, then this is what happened. I had a little bit of like a rage-filled, ego-fueled rant and said, you know what? No, I'm just going to tell you. I already know all this shit. Why am I sitting here at like 2 a.m. and trying to craft up this whole thing and pull a ton of quotes? I'll tell you, sit down. No, it's fine. Stop looking it up. I know how to get there. I don't need directions. And here's what's really fun for both filming and editing, Lars. There's 3 of me. It's writing, filming, and editing. I'm not leaving any notes. This is all I'm doing. Have fun in the moment filming, Lars. Don't screw it up, for the fault finders. So essentially, the Beatles trying to fulfill their third... Do I want to do it? Got the pointer. There's something powerful in the pointer. Charles Widmore. Second lost plug in the video. So the Beatles have 3 film contract with United Artists. They have to fulfill that, and rather than doing their typical live action thing, they make a deal with King Features to fulfill with an animated feature film. They contract TVC to create the feature film, and they're the ones who do the Beatles cartoon anyway. Obviously, the Beatles, part of their contract is to have 4 brand new, shiny, spanking, great new Beatles songs to come out with the movie, right? Just like the rest of them. They were hoping, like with Help and A Hard Day's Night, the album or the musical accompaniment would have some effort behind it, but they were also allowed to fill everything else with Sgt. Pepper songs. They had the pick of the litter. They did use a song from Revolver, or was it Rubber Soul? Nowhere Man is Rubber Soul, isn't it? Hang on, am I having a stroke? No, don't make a mistake, because that would be a real one. And the nitpickers would be right that I'm not a real fan. He's a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land. It is a report. He's a real nowhere man. Okay, that's all we get. That was 4 seconds.
Our legal team doesn't let us play a whole lot of music, so we're only going to be playing about 3 seconds worth of music.
Instead of a more concentrated effort, they just kind of used their table scraps from the Sgt. Pepper experimentation and other stuff that they just had cooking up. And then we were graced with It's All Too Much and Only a Northern Song. The attitude was table scraps. Like, here, you can have it. And here's what George says. George Martin. He says, that whole film was a package of problems, not least the fact that the Beatles were against the idea from the beginning. At that time, they were suspicious of anything that wasn't their own idea, and this was a deal which had been worked out between EMI, Brian Epstein, and the producers. It was to be a cartoon film, and producers were King Features, the American syndication outfit, whose main claim to fame was the strip The Flintstones. The Beatles clearly thought it was going to be yet another ripoff and wanted nothing to do with it. And that is what Al Brodax, he would have done it exactly like that. He would have done basically just an extended Beatles cartoon movie, and it would have been embarrassing to the Beatles. So their fears and their skepticism was well-founded. Thank God for the very creative minds at TVC who said, hey, actually, let's do some trippy, crazy shit. How's that? They basically strong-armed Al into realizing, oh, you're right, that's gonna actually play better. But Epstein had contracted not only for the film to use about a dozen of the Beatles' old songs, but for them to write 4 brand new titles. Their reaction was, okay, we've got to supply them with these bloody songs, but we're not going to fall over backwards providing them. We'll let them have them whenever we feel like it, and we'll give them whatever we think is all right. The result was that as we recorded songs for future albums, they would try out some little bit of nonsense at the end of the session, and as long as it worked moderately well, they would say, right, that's good enough for the film, let's let them have that. So the film scraped the bottom of the Beatle music barrel as far as new material was concerned. The songs they produced being Only a Northern Song, All Together Now, Hey Bulldog, and It's All Too Much. Before you start criticizing, saying those songs are the bottom of the barrel, because Hey Bulldog and It's All Too Much are very popular. During the Let's Listen section, all of the song information, all the quotes and the fun stuff behind it, the backstories, will be going with that. So everything with the backstory, praise, reactions, we'll have it there. So hold your horses. Complainer is like a really good one. This is just one account. And by the way, I have several sources are listed below. Most of them are linked. And that's all that really matters about the production, because like I said, I'm gonna go through a lot of how these songs were made when we're listening.
All right, lads. Time to stow the gab and turn to...
Groovy. How do you start this thing?
While the album, like I said, was released January 13th, 1969, it was recorded in nibs and nabs May 26, 1966 to February 11th, 1968. So there's not a cohesive full story behind all of these songs, right? Whereas with George Martin's stuff, all of his stuff was recorded October 22nd through 23rd of 1968. It charted second in the US, third in the UK, first in Canada, and did pretty well elsewhere. It did less well with the later releases, except Greece. Pop off. It was certified platinum in the US, Japan, and Argentina, diamond in France, and gold in UK and Canada. The first CD release was August 1987. All of the song lists and everything were the same as the original. And the 30th anniversary of the album was released September 1999 with the movie re-release. It does not include George Martin's tracks on it, but it features all the remixes of the Beatles songs in the movie. This is called Yellow Submarine Song Track. And the original remained in print and was remastered in 2009 along with the rest of the Beatles discography. The reviews were actually kind of hard to find, still are a little bit, and I'm not trying to be like a pick-me YouTuber. I use Wikipedia. I love it. It's a great place to start or go from or whatever, but I don't like to pull quotes directly from Wikipedia very often, and whenever I do, it makes me feel like icky and like I didn't really work for it. But I bumped into a couple of subscription walls, so I pull what I can where I can. In the Wikipedia article, though, there was a big chunk cited from this Peter Doggett article in a Mojo magazine, and if you know where to find Mojo magazines, like an archive or anything like that, hit me up. So I'm just gonna read the Wikipedia chunk from here. Peter Doggett writes, the papers got all trippy for Yellow Submarine. Beat Instrumental bemoaned the paucity of new material by the band, but added, be not of bad cheer. The George Martin score to the film is really very nice, and 2 tracks by George Harrison redeem the first side. Both songs are superb pieces, considerably more enthralling than the most draggy Altogether Now, a rather wet track. In a review for International Times, Barry Miles considered Martin's score superbly produced, and of the songs wrote only of It's All Too Much, which he described variously as endless mantric, around interwoven, trellised, tessellated, filigreed, gilded something, spiraling, and happy sing-along music. Record Mirror's reviewer said that given the long-standing demand for a soundtrack album, the release of Yellow Submarine would evoke the ecstasy of fans the world over. The reviewer added that the 4 new Beatles songs matched the quality of the 2 excellent hit singles, and Martin's side represented a tremendous achievement that also justified any complaints about the price. Writing in their 1975 book, The Beatles, an Illustrated Record, Enemy critics Roy Carr and Tony Tyler bemoaned the commercial considerations that had resulted in the release of a full soundtrack album, saying that the 4 new tracks, quote, would have made a superb EP. And a lot of people felt that way. So in a minute, we'll talk about the Beatles' consideration of a different release of an EP after getting a little bit of criticism. But the AllMusic reviewer Richie Unterberger cuts to the core in the first line of his review. He says, the only Beatles album that could really be classified as inessential, mostly because it wasn't really a proper album at all, but a soundtrack that only utilized 4 new Beatles songs. And the Pitchfork starts theirs with, hey, nobody's perfect. Like, these two are quick to point out this album wasn't it. So Unterberger goes on to say, what's more, 2 of the 4 new tracks were little more than pleasant throwaways that had been recorded during 1967 and early 1968. These aren't all that bad. Altogether Now is a cute, kiddyish McCartney sing-along, while Hey Bulldog has some mild Lennon nastiness and a great beat and central piano riff with some fine playing all around. Each is memorable in its own way. George Harrison's 2 contributions were the more striking of the new entries. Only a Northern song was left over from Sgt. Pepper's sessions, and then there was the jewel of the new songs, It's All Too Much. The very fact George Harrison was afforded 2 song slots and a relatively uncompetitive canvas for his music shows how little the project meant to Lennon and McCartney, as did the cutting of Hey Bulldog sequence from the movie, apparently with no resistance from Lennon, who had other more important artistic fish to fry in 1968. What is here, however, is a good enough reason for owning the record, though nothing rates it as anything near a high priority purchase. The album would have been far better value if it had been released as a 4-song EP. Pitchfork calls it the opposite of Magical Mystery Tour. It says, as a souvenir of the film, Yellow Submarine has its place, and in fairness, it was never intended as a major release. But as an album, it's ultimately forgettable, which is something the Beatles so rarely were otherwise. Rob Sheffield from Rolling Stone, in the Rolling Stone album guide, rates this album 2.5 stars, and we'll hear from him more later, but he wound up giving the song track 4 stars. So there's an improvement there with all of these new songs and the removal of George Martin's contribution. But here's what he said about the original album. Her Majesty the Queen had the best comment. The Beatles are turning awfully funny, aren't they? By now the Beatles didn't need to push. They could have hit number 1 with a tape of themselves blowing their noses. Revolution number 9.
Number 9, number 9, number 9. Number 9.
Interesting. I like what Alan Clayson said in his Ringo Starr Straight Man or Joker book. He brings up something, it was a different point that I would not have thought of. He says, however much its content has been devalued by reassessment, this syncretic work, he's talking about Yellow Submarine, was technically an improvement on the preceding LP Revolver, which had contained Yellow Submarine, the only British number 1 with Ringo as lead singer. With a suggestion or 2 from Donovan, a crumpled Scot who'd started as a UK answer to Dylan, this had been contrived by Paul and John as an ideal, we'll hear from Donovan as well later, as an ideal children's song for Star that would simultaneously capture a flavor of nautical Liverpool with one-shot novelty of such as The Runaway Train, The Singing Dogs, or The Southlanders, I Am Mole, and I Live in a Hole. Plus the topicality, okay, let's see, The Runaway Train. I do not not recognize this? What year did... This is from 1998. I mean... Yeah. That's novel for sure. Plus a topicality in its spoken prologue, while referred obliquely to Dr. Barbara Moore's hike from Land's End to John O'Groats. This would be cut partly because today's news is tomorrow's guinea pig hutchliner. That was said kind of weird, but what he's saying is there was a spoken word intro. It was cut later. I have a reaction to it, so I'll add it in a minute. More and more decisions of this magnitude were being made in the studio now that 10 hours, the time spent recording the Beatles' first LP, was no longer considered adequate for one track these days. Quote, "We're quite big with EMI at the moment," understated Ringo. "They don't argue if we take the time we want." But the public argued. They were not happy. I like that Mark Lewison, was quoted as the Beatles being mildly criticized for this album, saying that it was not great. I like this. I just think it's a funny way to say it, but Kenneth Womack actually sums it up really well. Not surprisingly, fans and critics alike were suitably miffed with the release, which included several songs that were already available and the score for a film that was, by that point, already 6 months old. And I wrote, and let me interject here, that I don't know what I was supposed to interject with. Suitably miffed, though. I like that. So I don't know what I was supposed to interject with, but you didn't put the note in, so not that sorry. With cover art by Heinz Edelman, the Yellow Submarine soundtrack nevertheless registered top 5 showings in both the UK and US marketplaces, where consumer enthusiasm for new Beatles product continued to reign supreme, which is still true to this day. Indeed, the soundtrack might have even topped the charts had there not been another newly minted Beatles release in heavy rotation the world over. And he goes on to say, in March 1969, the bandmates... I've got a cat at the door, I'm going to finish this though. The bandmates considered releasing a 5-song EP, which was slated to include the still unreleased Across the Universe as a bonus track in order to afford their fans with better value for their money. EMI even went so far as to instruct Edward Gatsby Tony to create a master tape for the EP, which was composed of only a northern song, Hey Bulldog, Across the Universe, All Together Now, and It's All Too Much. But the project was scrapped not long afterward. It was a tricky proposition in any event, given Martin's contractual rights regarding the Yellow Submarine project, which called for his score to be showcased with the Beatles' original songs. As it happened, the full Yellow Submarine soundtrack proved to be one of the biggest paydays in George's career. Orchestrating the film score, he later admitted, was, quote, very rewarding both artistically and financially. With Yellow Submarine, he was finally fulfilling his dream of earning residuals for his contributions to his artist's success, the very same case that he had attempted to prosecute. Okay, whatever, that doesn't matter. I mean, it's talking about a lawsuit, which does matter, but because this never was released, I saw it on like a lost media forum, but then I saw this reply where it's like, well, look at the track list, it's hardly a lost media, because basically, I mean, they considered it. They mixed it March 13th, 1969. The A-side was Only a Northern Song, Hey Bulldog, Across the Universe. B-side, All Together Now, and It's All Too Much. And yeah, let's go see what my cat has to say. But before I start ripping shit apart, we're going to have to go to the liner notes and pray for forgiveness. Yes, Jack? Cat temporarily diverted. Hey, this is me from later. What do you think would have I don't know how that would have gone down. Like, how do you think that would have gone down? It would have sold great because it's the Beatles, so it's always going to be in the top 5, right? I already read somewhere it was only topped by itself, it's only topped by its other albums that are being released. I don't know how this would have played. It just would have been another release because this would have come out in May. This came out in January of 69. They were waiting for Let It Be. That's a whole deal, Phil Spector. And then in May, this would have been basically a re-release of Yellow Submarine with one more song that they'd already heard. And then Casual dropped that September 26, 1969. They also dropped Abbey Road, but that's too far. They were already, you know what I'm saying? That's too far ahead. I just wanted to mention it just for funsies. If they had done that, the criticisms today would be like, that was weird. They would have called this a weird choice, I think. But I just think it was just a weird choice.
A submarine remarkably like our own. Uncannily.
So let me explain something. About 5 minutes before I go in to film this, I had decided to look for some more reviews because of some stuff coming up here. And I had realized that the liner notes editions that I had before was somehow the 2009 one. I had only read this fictitious report from a Yellow Submarine character. It was really fun and entertaining, but I thought that this introduction and review was part of the 2009 release, so I was like, let's leave it. Therefore, leading into a reaction I can only describe as very genuine and a little embarrassing, but just let me have, you're gonna have to stick with me and wait for this idiot to realize what's going on. Here's what's funny though. I started out explaining that I view reading the liner notes, and I only started doing this like a couple videos ago, so it's new, but I kind of view it as like a ritualistic part of listening to the music. And you're going in with kind of like this clean slate, you're knowing exactly what was going on at the minute, and the Beatles did at least read it over and approve it at the very least. So it gives a little spark, and especially when some of these are written by George Martin, etc., people that really put something into the liner notes. And so I kind of view it as like not like a prayer, but I don't know, it's just part of the deal. You know, it's kind of like facty facts, but this is like our sermon, if that makes any sense, because I don't know why I'm trying to verbalize it. I think it's kind of weird that I'm trying to verbalize it. However, I'm going in a little bit more naive than I've ever gone in on something because I just didn't have a chance to read it. Luckily, I did know of a quote later on that does matter, kind of relating to this, but I had no idea. So this should be good. My name is Derek, but that is what Mother called me, so it's no big thing, except that it is my name. And I would like to say that I was asked to write the notes for Yellow Submarine. Now, Derek Taylor used to be the Beatles press agent, and then in America, he became the former Beatles press agent, having left them. And now Derek Taylor is the press agent for the Beatles again. So when he was asked to write the notes for Yellow Submarine, in quotes this time, he decided that not only he had nothing new to say about the Beatles, whom he adores too much to apply any critical reasoning, God, same, any critical reasoning, and by whom he is paid too much to feel completely free. Oh shit. And he also couldn't be bothered. And also he wanted the people who bought the Yellow Submarine album to buy and enjoy the really wonderful The Beatles album out. Oh my god. And then back in the month of November 68, so here and now, unbought, unsolicited, unexpurgated, unattached, pure and immeasurably favorable is a review of The Beatles, the new Apple/EMI album, from the London Observer by Tony Palmer, a journalist and filmmaker of some special distinction. So, Mr. Derek Taylor, Mr. O'Crumb's boy. Sorry, Lars, put it in there. One of the running jokes, ongoing gimmicks on my channel is that I will bring up some obscure Get Back quote because I am obsessed with it. I've seen it more than 30 times. That is a true thing. That is not a joke. And I'm also working on the big video, which is the Get Back, Let It Be, the whole project. I have books and I've been it's a whole thing. But this time, you know, sometimes a bitch makes mistakes. Derek Taylor isn't even the one who said this. It is literally and very obviously John Lennon. What happened to my brain? It's gone. It is gone.
See Michael Halsey today? Don't you think it's suitable? No. What about the fisticuffs? Yeah, none of that. It didn't take place, right? He said it did. No. Oh, thanks.
Mr. O'Crumb's Taylor shows up and says, I'm going to write this in a really hilarious, definitely Beatle-friendly humor way. Love it. I think that's so funny. But he also doesn't even care. I don't really care because I want you to buy the White Album instead because they worked on that. That's what really matters. And so since I can't critique them and also because I can't be fucked, here's a real review from a person. A highly favorable real review. So I guess fuck off, you know? That's kind of funny. I mean, it's funny, it's cute, but it's also like
a little half-assed, you know. It could have been a little bit better. From the London Observer by Tony Palmer. If there is still any doubt that Lennon and McCartney are the greatest songwriters since Schubert, the next Friday, with the publication of the Beatles' double LP, should surely see the last vestiges of cultural snobbery and the bourgeois prejudice swept away in a deluge of joyful music making, which only the ignorant will not hear and only the deaf will not acknowledge. Called simply the Beatles PMC. Oh, okay. This is literally... Oh my God, wait, I misread this. Oh my God, I'm misreading this. So instead he adds... Wait, that's so shitty. Wait, that's not cool. That's fucked up. So he can't be fucked. Derek Taylor. Oh, crumbs. He doesn't even... That is a review for the White Album. So he doesn't include... He says, I can't be bothered to even write an intro because I want you to buy this other album that just came out 2 months ago. By the way, here's a highly favorable review by a journalist from a noted publication that is super, super long. Oh my God. That's like fucked up. If I were the artist of the film, actually, I would be offended by that. I wonder what they thought about that. I wonder what George Martin thought about that. He didn't say anything about it. I wrote something about this that I thought was kind of good on the back of a postcard. Okay. I have to say that this is one of those moments where I'm giving my honest opinions more than I ever have before, and I'm nervous about giving them. I will always think, who am I to critique the Beatles in any way, shape, or form? And that's freaking valid. I'm just a dork with a land talking to a phone. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. If I haven't mentioned it already, I have major gaps in Beatles knowledge, and any sort of like expert titles you want to attach to me, I don't think you should. So I don't know if my critiques really have a place. These are just things that are on my mind, and I guess it is my land. So I wrote them, and I think that if we're gonna have, I know I'm defending myself really hard right now, so that's fine, whatever. But like, the whole premise of this was to have this adult conversation, to just address the things right up front. And I'm not trying to like overly plug my movie video, though it is honestly objectively very good. I worked so hard on it, and it's very in-depth, and it has a high standard that I have only put toward Lost before. And it had a conspiracy board, obviously, as we've seen. In that video, I explain a lot of things, but the continuing issue with the ongoing disappointment of Yellow Submarine was the lack of credit that went toward the artists, the voice actors, and how there was a big public perception that the Beatles did all of the movie at some point, and also that Peter Max was the art designer behind the Yellow Submarine, which I absolutely 1000% traced this. I would prefer that you don't judge me or on really any of this. I also traced that. It looked so bad at first, so it looks better now. I like this, and I'm proud of it. I think it looks good. Anyway, back to the thing. The movie video explains this big issue about credit and content creator rights. And so this is something I am a little passionate about now that I had spent, 2.5 months. When did I start? I started this April 16th. So we're on 3 months now. And so I've been working on this for so long that it does make sense that I kind of got attached to these people. I feel that Derek's introduction and the choice to use a very positive White Album review was very Beatle-y in a way, but Beatle humor stops at a point of being mean, the public Beatle humor. And yes, there's meanness between the 4 bugs. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the Beatle brand humor. I feel like this is such an indictment of where the Beatles were mentally. They were so out of it. I mean, you saw the timeline. They were obviously dealing with a lot, but the Beatles were not themselves. Derek Taylor obviously didn't care about honoring this release whatsoever. So I wrote, I do feel that it's very funny to do, and it's almost Beatle-y, but Not quite. This is just such an indication and disappointment. And I'm just as dubious as you, but I intend to enjoy and defend this album, these songs, and well, with some minor tweaks. And because of that, I'll be putting in more effort into my defense, introduction, and representation of this album than Derek Taylor. Oh, crumbs. So basically, no, I'm not reading this dude's review. It's not a review of Yellow Submarine. It's not worth it to me. If I wanted a review about the White Album, I would be doing my video on the White Album, which I kept thinking about doing, but God, no, I can't. I'm not ready for that shit. I'm just displeased. That's all I have to say. I'm displeased. So basically they say, hey, here's our table scraps. Here's our chicken feed, which I don't agree with. I actually really like the Beatles contributions. I really like all 4 of those songs. And I mean that genuinely. I have been known to be overly praisey in my opinions. And I am. If I'm being like objective, I think all 4 of those are very good. I think if you don't like All Together Now, you're just a sourpuss and you're probably lying. I think the addition of Tomorrow Never Knows would have been really good. But here is the fictional account from Dan Davis. Somewhere during the hours between the years 700 and 750 Anno Domini, a brother... I know I looked this up.
Anno Domini.
Anno Domini. Read it like it's... Read it with oomph, not like you're in school. Somewhere during the hours between the years of 700 and 750 Anno Domini, a brother from the Northumbrian monastery wrote of a youthful thane of King Hygelac, king of the Geats.
Pronunciation, character name from Beowulf, Hygelac, Hygelac.
Named Beowulf. And because of this being a Beowulf representation, and because, oh my god, why am I gonna do this? I'm doing this. I am doing this. Because of that nightmare failed CGI reboot of Yellow Submarine. That guy, the director, Robert Zemeckis, great director, done a lot of amazing stuff. Also did Beowulf, which was a mocap. It was disturbing. I loved it. I loved it. So that's gonna go on the screen now. Feast your eyes, bitch. A superhero who arrived from far by sea to rescue Herod. A feasting hall built by a benevolent old king called Hrothgar. A feasting hall that exuded the pleasures of food and music by perpetual celebration, and all that was raison d'être.
Reason for being, or reason to be. In French, we would say it as raison d'être.
Raison d'être. Sure. A feasting hall which for years had been ravaged by the villainy of an evil spirit named Grendel. Having already... See, this is perfect, right? You guys have something cool to look at, man. Having already proven his mettle as a good guy combatant par excellence by the conquering of a picturesque sea monster in a victory over Brecca in a swimming match, Beowulf goes forth to rid the once beautiful Northumbrian landscape of destructive Grendel, a demon who indeed perishes when his arm is delicately dislodged from its socket by Mr. Wolf.
And power! I am power!
The kingdom is saved, albeit after disposing of Grendel's mother, who took unkindly to this action. Yeah, she probably would have been pissed. And Harold, insert it, I don't care, restored with the pleasures or rude. It's probably of food. Sometimes it copies weird. Of food and music and perpetual celebration and colorful beauty of restoration, which permits bigger and better glories to be raised to the local gods addressed as words. Some 465 years later, 1215, an English king named King John signed a Magna Carta at a roost called Runnymede, an act of prodded royalty which liberated barons and bumpkins to roost, whatever, with a greater degree of care freedom. Some 560 years later than that 1776, a Virginia gent named Jefferson quilled a Declaration of Independence in, of all places, Philadelphia, and shipped it to a king called King George, which hypothetically rid a small group of New World colonies from crimson-frocked enforcers from a faraway land. Taxations without representations vanished and the colonies flourished. Oh my god, why like dun 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 dun, flourished freely under a hero. Okay, ruffled feathers on both sides of the sea have since been plucked. What is it? Like the friendship or whatever. What do they call it? Special relationship. Yeah. Some 561 years later than that, and in 1968, some 1,218 years Anno Bao, AB, 753 years Anno Magna, AM, 192 years Anno Declaration, AD. Bad people, blue meanies, would still force their wills on good people, Pepperlanders, and demolish the human and physical landscape of beautiful pleasure domes, Pepperland. And Agnes, the inquisitive babysitter next door in California, United States of America, will be pleased to know that there are still heroes around the calibers of Messrs. Wolfe, John, and Jefferson. There's John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and their attending Lonely Hearts Club Band, who sail from one place, Liverpool, at the invitation of a benevolent but old leader of another place, the Lord Mayor of Pepperland, to rescue the pleasures of food and music and perpetual celebration and colorful beauty from the villainous hands of the less than beautiful people, blue meanies, who act under the supreme guidance of the most evil spirit, Chief Blue Meanie. Also, jokingly, sort of, this guy and his assistant, Abe. The Beatles come by sea, through the seas of monsters, time, music, science, consumer products, nowhere, green phonology, and holes, each puddle supporting a lively cast of characters. By the way, these things here are not technically scenes that are really in the movie, but they are scenes that are in the Yellow Submarine book that came out, and that was originally just written inspired by the Yellow Submarine song, and it was quite different than what it wound up being published as, but it was written based off one of the evolving scripts. The script changed the whole time while they were making the movie. The movie evolved as it was going. Nobody knew what was going on the whole time. It's literally, it's like if you're painting. Okay, so you're painting a bowling ball, Van Gogh, Starry Night on a bowling ball with a bunch of people. There has to be like 5 people. There's enough room for all of you. No, there's not really. You're crammed, but you're not too crammed because there's a lot of creative freedom. You don't have a bunch of space. Money. So you have a bunch of people and you can all comfortably touch your ball, okay? But you are under a crunch. While you have your space, you are in fact being rolled down a lane. So you're running while you're trying to create Starry Night on a bowling ball with a bunch of other people. By the way, there are groups of this side and this side that should be talking that can't because we're all running. Maybe they could have made efforts to move their spots on the bowling ball, but they didn't. It is kind of a messy paint job, but somehow turned out to be really good and incredibly inspiring to generations of animators. This movie was really bizarre and difficult, so the fact that it got made was crazy, and the Beatles were a part of it. They just weren't really, they were always running with a bowling ball, but the weird thing about the Beatles is the rolling with the bowling ball, for the 4 of them, that was fine. They were so happy doing it. When the 4 of them, get your voice, kid. When the 4 of them were making music the way that they wanted to be, that's exactly how they wanted to be. They wanted to be painting Van Gogh on a bowling ball running down a lane together because that's the way that they do things, impossibly, and it would turn out perfectly. That's the Beatles. What is this metaphor? So what I'm saying is this is from the book. So some of these like consumer products, green phrenology and holes, none of those. There was green phrenology and there was the headlands. So I guess it's kind of interesting that Dan Davis's account is based off of the book version, not the movie. And they had several months to make this, you know? So each pedal supporting a lively cast of characters and a yellow submarine captained by Old Fred, also the leader of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, where they prove their heroic medal by outwitting a sea monster, Vacuum Man, and outswimming competition, School of Whales, even before they reached the shores of the besieged undersea kingdom of Pepperland. Once arrived at the target P, they triumph over the Chief Blue Meanie's primary evil-tempered henchman, for example, the lanky apple bonker, who assaults his prey with Baldwin apples, the corpulent hidden persuadant with a penchant for the underhanded unscrupulence, the abdominal snapping turtle Turk who chomps at the slightest bit, the belligerent butterfly stompers who perform tasks that any evil butterfly stompers worth their soul would perform with supreme acuity. The good guys win. The hero Beatles triumph once again and restore the pleasures of color and music and all that's beautiful. A restoration which permits bigger and better glories to be sung to the reigning god of Pepperland, addressed as love. Dan Davis. I agree. All of the stuff about Chief Blue Meanies, everything with the bad guys, this is all accurate. So I was just nitpicking about the stuff beforehand. This is a very good description of Yellow Submarine. It's different from what we typically get for a Beatles album, but it is hard. Also, so far, no mention of George at all. He's half this album. So Derek Taylor doesn't mention George Martin, he just mentions the White Album and the Beatles. So these are the recording notes on the 2009 issuance, and these are provided by Alan Rouse and Kevin Howlett. The 4 new Beatles songs included on side 1 of Yellow Submarine had, in fact, been recorded a long time before the album's release of January 1969. 3 came from 1969, and Hey Bulldog was completed in February 1968. The most recent recordings on the LP was the film score on side 2, which George Martin had re-recorded with an orchestra of 41 musicians in Studio 1 of Abbey Road in October 1968. The songs that were introduced on Yellow Submarine were made in the period when only 4-track tape machines were available to the group of Abbey Road. That was fine for All Together Now and Hey Bulldog, which were confined to 4 tracks. However, the other 2 songs required extra tracks, and the usual method was to create them by, quote, bouncing down. This process involved copying the first reel's completed 4 tracks to a new tape and simultaneously combining some of them to leave free as many tracks as were needed for additional overdubs. It's All Too Much was begun and then bounced down to a second tape at Delane League. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's Delane Leah, or it's D-E space Lane space Leah. Lee? Don't know. We're going with that, okay? I'm not doing what I did the other day for a Patreon video. I was looking for something and I wound up watching like racing footage. We're not gonna go do that because I'm gonna wind up looking for something and it was weird. One time I tried to look it up and I wound up at like a brow salon place in the UK. I don't know, man. We're just gonna let it go. I'm sorry. I'm gonna lose my voice. So we got throat spray. To a third 4-track at Abbey Road, more overdubs were added so that 9 tracks were used to complete the song. Damn, that's cool. In contrast, using just 1 4-track tape, Hey Bulldog was recorded, overdubbed, and mixed in a single 10-hour session. Track 1 had drums, piano, guitar, and tambourine. 2 contained bass, guitar, and offbeat drum with reverb. A double-tracked vocal and guitar solo were on 3, and the final track included John's lead vocals, with Paul singing a backing vocal and an additional guitar solo. Dating back to the sessions for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, only a northern song had been recorded in a unique manner. Something like this should have been on the original album. I came in with criticism that I haven't even gotten into yet, that I somehow completely missed this. And now I'm kind of pissed off at the Beatles. That's fucked up. They're meeting their contract obligations. So like, why did they put it out? I have what George Martin says about it. Hear it in a little bit, which the producers wanted. But now I have beef because I think something like this, oh my fucking God, should have been included in the first one. Derek Taylor must have smoked a blunt and then said, okay, fuck off, I'm gonna write this. Did I not look at did Derek Taylor mention Yellow Submarine in his book? Did he ever address this? Oh yeah, no, I had an interview with him where he says that benefited from the inattention. Yeah, hang on. This is an interview with Dr. Bob. He says, at the time when it came out, the movie, of course, all kinds of things were happening around Apple. It was getting extremely busy. I had taken on too much, and to endeavor to enable people to get recording contracts and bring in paintings. We'll help you get your paintings hung. We'll get your books and poems published. We'll get music recorded, and all the promises that were made, which we were trying to fulfill by the summer of '68 when Yellow Submarine came out. There were great strains and stresses around the Beatles and Apple. So it was difficult to concentrate on Yellow Submarine then for me too. It came and went, I have to say, as it might not have done had it been quieter at times. It was a time of an awful lot of office stress, and stress in offices can be quite extreme. Yeah, if you're bringing in like the Hells Angels and stuff, things do get kind of extreme. When did he do that? I just read that. When did he... The dates do not line up, okay? So don't get mad. I know the dates don't line up. December 4th, 1968. So yeah, what I'm talking about is when George Harrison invites the Hells Angels into Apple for a couple days. Yeah. So yeah, point stands. I'm smart and cool. I do know lots of things about the Beatles, actually. Beatles expert title reinstated. I never know what to call myself. It was not a propitious time for a movie to be around. It was not as if all their efforts had gone into making it. And most people, when they're making a movie or contributing to a movie, that's all they're doing. It absorbs all their time. They can think of nothing else. They can see nothing else. But Yellow Submarine, in a sense, coming along, moving along past them, way away on a parallel track. I didn't listen to this, so I don't know how the cadence of how he said this. This was a radio interview with Brodax and all those people who were putting it together. So I say it suffered in our internal world. It suffered from a lack of attention. Our response to it suffered from inattention to it because the thing was happening anyway. The songs had been provided. The essence of the Beatles was undoubtedly conveyed in the way that they were cheerful in all this. I think that also perhaps they felt, it certainly has been said since, that there was a lack of delineation between individual characteristics, but this was an animated feature and it was a wonderful piece of work and it looks great today. So I guess he did respond in a way. He does seem a little apologetic around the attitude of it, and you know what? You know what, Derek?
Oh, thanks.
Now listen, this is the part where I say, please don't, cancel me. Please don't cancel me. The original Yellow Submarine release didn't make any sense. They do the 4 new contracted songs and the 4 George songs. People know about the movie, but it didn't come out with the movie. But there were a lot of more songs in the movie. And what's the thing with, is this a Beatles album? And who is this guy? And what's the deal with only there being 4? What's the deal? And then the Beatles decide we're not really going to address it. We're just going to bulldoze past it, which is fine. I would have done the same thing. Frankly, that's what I would have done. And then it comes out with all of the songs just in Yellow Submarine, but ignores the original compositions. It seems like there's always something incomplete between that original album and the song track that came out in whatever year. In their 1999 release, they have no George. They just have all the remastered, which was great. And I did some research on the remastering. It was really well done. It was super nerve-wracking for the engineers. They did a lot of work on it. It sounded really great. But it feels weird to exclude some stuff that's now been so associated with Yellow Submarine. I didn't like it. I'm not a fan of that. So this album is hated, and I think I get it. I'm not saying it should be, but I understand why. Do I like it? With my full chest, yes. I do like it.
I say what I said. Heal from it or move on.
I have been listening to it a lot. At first, I was just listening to it because I wanted to be able to have good interjections during the instrumentals and be able to have not only good reactions, but things that were worthwhile to say. And now that I've said that out loud, I haven't filmed that part yet, so I'm probably going to let you down. Apologies. But I was listening to it a lot, and I got into finding it a bop, and I wound up listening to it a lot. I did get a little burnout on it. Now we're back, baby. We're so back. The last thing I wanted to get in here with the Hair Splitter is a good one. Hair Splitter. I wanted to know the difference between a soundtrack and a song track. This is called a song track. It's all the songs from the album, right? I wound up Googling this shit. Then you wind up on a Quora thread, a Reddit thread, and then it's just giving you kind of definitions of components of songs and you're like, okay, no, but the meaning of a soundtrack is the main music from a movie and or TV show or accompaniment multimedia project. Here's the music, right? I found this Reddit post that says, explain like I'm 5, the difference between theme song, soundtrack, and OST. It says that a soundtrack is all music featured in that media. If a theme song is a song, a soundtrack is the album that it's on. Everything I've said here is incredibly confusing. I apologize, but there's that.
Pepperland is a tickle of joy on the blue belly of the universe.
In general, the biggest issue with Yellow Submarine has been over and over the track list, whether or not we should have kept in the instrumentals, whether or not we chose the correct songs to go on that original 1969 release, because there are songs in the Yellow Submarine movie that take up a lot of real estate that did not make it onto that original release. Is the original Yellow Submarine album a good representation of the Yellow Submarine movie? And does it matter? I'm not sure if it matters, but I feel like it should. Essentially what I did, I made the right one. I made the correct track listing. I made the good Yellow Submarine album. This, my friends, is the correct opinion.
It must be scratched.
Here's what Lars would have done if we were going to put all of the songs in order with all of them that are included. And there are clips of other songs that didn't quite make it in here. Baby, You're a Rich Man is somewhere in here. So there might be some that are not in, but these are all the main ones, okay? 1, Pepperland. 2, March of the Meanies. Yellow Submarine, then Eleanor. In between here, we have the test footage, which plays Love You Too. And then there's the crescendo from A Day in the Life. And then we have All Together Now, Sea of Time, When I'm 64, Only a Northern Song, Sea of Monsters, Nowhere Man, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Sea of Holes, and then Think for Yourself, just like a little bit. Pepperland Laid Waste, All You Need Is Love, Yellow Submarine in Pepperland, Hey Bulldog, finally, It's All Too Much. And at first I was like, that's how I'm gonna give it. And then I was like, I am an aware person. I feel like people are gonna immediately drop off if I start with Pepperland and Blue Meanies, and it's just gonna be like, oh, I guess we're just listening to the movie now. So I decided to do it similarly to the original release, but a little bit differently. So this is my order. Yellow Submarine, Eleanor Rigby, All Together Now, When I'm 64, Only a Northern Song, Nowhere Man, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, All You Need Is Love, Pepperland, March of the Meanies, Sea of Time, Sea of Monsters, Sea of Holes, Pepperland Laid Waste, Yellow Submarine in Pepperland, and even though they're broken up, It's All Too Much would be final, because I do feel like that song is just so different and I have lots of feelings about it. I will absolutely be indulging that, not only my emotions, but other people's reactions to the song. So all of that being said, that is the official Lars Land soundtrack album in order, and we're going to listen to it. As usual, I'm going to be going through information that we have on each song. There are a lot of songs here that have a lot of story behind them, including Yellow Submarine, Eleanor Rigby, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. These are some big backstory songs. Not to beat a dead copyright violation, but
Our legal team doesn't let us play a whole lot of music, so we're only going to be playing about 3 seconds worth of music.
Music is limited on YouTube. I do my best to split it up. This time I've decided to do something I've never done before, which is split the readings into the music. So I will be reading about the story, cutting in, you'll see my reactions. Bear with me, but I hope that maybe some of this will make it more interesting as we're listening to the music, especially for the more instrumental parts. We can listen to the music and then we can enjoy some stories about said songs. So we can be smart and cool and groovy all at the same time. Let's play it. It's later. Couple days later. So when the new Revolver release in October 2022 came out, the Beatles showed us there was a Yellow Submarine demo track that came out. There are a lot of stories about Yellow Submarine, how it came about, the inception of it, how it was formed, but none of this had included this introductory, very melodic, very sad demo from John.
In the place where I was born, no one cared, no one cared.
In the place where I was born, no one cared, no one cared. And, you know, this is a pretty... that's pretty John, considering the time frame. They're not quite to, you know, I'm lonely, I want to die when he's writing this. So obviously this is the introduction of Yellow Submarine with just a little bit of a change in the melody. And it's really beautiful, little haunting. That tracks. And then also there is the songwriting work tape / part 2. This is 4 minutes, so. Gentle and final reminder that I'm cutting music into the readings. So I'll be telling a story and then I pop in there with some music and then I come back with the story and then I'm popping there with some music, and I know that it jumps a lot, but hey man, you gotta take it up with YouTube and not me. It is not my fault.
In the town where I was born.
This is from the Beatles engineer, Jeff Emmerich. So when I filmed this before, I guess I just cut off the first 2 sentences of this or something. I'm not sure what happened, so I'm rereading it. Most of that afternoon was spent trying to record a spoken word introduction to Yellow Submarine. Back in 1960, there had been a well-publicized charity walk by a doctor named Barbara Moore from Land's End to John O'Groats, the 2 points farthest apart on the British mainland.
Who sailed to sea.
John, who often had his head buried in a newspaper when he wasn't playing guitar or singing, had written a short medieval-sounding poem that somehow tied the walk to the song title, and he was determined to have Ringo recite it, accompanied by the sound of marching feet. I pulled out the old radio trick of shaking coal in a cardboard box to simulate footsteps, and Ringo did his best to emote deadpan, but the final result was, in a word, boring. Even though we spent hours and hours putting it together, the whole idea was eventually scrapped. Nearly 30 years later, we did tack the introduction back onto the remixed version of Yellow Submarine that was included on the B-side CD single of Real Love, one of 2 Lennon songs completed posthumously by the surviving Beatles and released in 1996, which is no longer true, as Now and Then came out in 2023. One thing I did neglect to mention was that there were a lot of effects in this song. We'll talk about it, but things like Mal was shaking things that were not eventually included or have been included in different mixes. There's all kinds of fun anecdotes that just can't make it in. There's too much.
And he told us of his life.
Eventually, you know, the end product is a reflection of the researcher. So things that I see over and over and over again, commonly told anecdotes, I try to just graze past them as fast as I possibly can and include things that I find more interesting, intriguing, or things that maybe add to the story rather than things that I just see everywhere that I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's cool.
Yellow Submarine. And we will march till 3 the day to see them gathered there. From Land of Groats to John O'Groats with Stepney.
Okay, it's super cute, but that sound, can't do that. Will not do that.
With Stepney.
Okay, and we're also gonna ignore, okay, I would be super cute without makeup on if my face wasn't red. I get it, okay? Stop.
Do we tread to see us Yellow Submarine?
I think he's emoting. I think he's emoting really well, okay?
We love it. In the town where I was.
I think we made the right call by not putting it in originally. Paul had conceived Yellow Submarine as a sing-along, and so a few of the band's friends and significant others had been invited along for the evening session. By then, everyone was distinctly in a party mood. Though we hadn't tried pot ourselves, Phil and I had been around enough musicians to know what it was, and we were sometimes aware of the funny smell in the studio after the Beatles and their roadies snuck a joint off in the corner.
In the land of submarines.
Though I doubt very much if the straightforward George Martin knew what was going on. Like guilty kids, Mal or Neil would sometimes try to cover the odor by lighting incense, but that in itself was a tip-off to us. We didn't say anything, though. If the Beatles wanted to get high during their recording sessions, it was none of our business. We were there to do a job, and we just carried on with the work at hand.
So we sailed to the sun.
This is such a good use of sound effects. Oh my goodness. It's not overwhelming. It is very childlike, as their aim was, but it works really well. So he was talking about pot, and then he says that after a long dinner break, he was pretty sure the boys lit up, a raucous group began filtering in. This included Mick Jagger, Brian Jones, Marianne Faithfull, George Harrison's wife, Patty, Jeff's book. He also mentioned that the two Rolling Stones and Marianne Faithfull were kind of like standoffish. They pretended like he didn't exist, but Patty was really charming, and she seemed shy, but she went out of her way to say hello, which we all know about Patty, and she's super sweet.
In a yellow submarine.
Dun, 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 dun. That little very simple guitar underneath hits it perfect. The whole marijuana influence scene that evening was completely zany, straight out of a Marx Brothers movie. The entire EMI collection of percussion instruments and sound effects boxes were strewn all over the studio, with people grabbing bells and whistles and gongs at random. To simulate a sound of submarine submerging, John grabbed a straw and began blowing bubbles into a glass. Fortunately, I was able to move to a mic nearby in time to record it for posterity. Inspired, John wanted to take things to the next level and have me record him actually singing underwater. First, he tried singing while gargling. When that failed, he nearly choked. He began lobbying for a tank to be brought in so that he could be submerged.
We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine.
Okay, the harmonies are so good here. I'm gonna take a break now, and I'll probably come back in the morning. I know that these were like the scraps of what the Beatles thought weren't good enough or whatever, but the work behind the songs, even though this is one of those genuine John shenanigans, he was still enthusiastic and working hard on the songs. Once it finally turned into this project, the enthusiasm was gone. So I want to remind everybody that the magic behind the song wasn't like, oh my god, you know what I'm saying? All right, so we'll be back in the morning with a voice. Listen on the downside of the harmony for George here.
Yellow submarine, yellow submarine.
Isn't that really great? It's so simple, yet it's such a lovely sound. I don't know music theory. I don't know anything. I can play like on the guitar, and I haven't in years and years. So I really don't have any credibility when it comes to talking about music. So please feel free to shit on me. I will take it personally and be sad about it, but I like the harmony. He began lobbying for a tank to be brought in so that he could be submerged. This boy, while George Martin worked at dissuading him, I began thinking of an alternative. Why not instead have John sing into a mic that was immersed in water?
We all live in a yellow submarine.
We had several small spot microphones on hand, and if one of them could be wrapped in some kind of waterproofing, perhaps it would work. George looked at me as if I were crazy, but John imploring him to let us try it, he finally gave us his begrudging approval, adding ominously that if the microphone was damaged or destroyed, it would be coming out of my paycheck. Cool. His words had a sobering effect on me. I wasn't making all that much money at the time, but it was too late to back out.
Yellow submarine, yellow submarine.
So basically, Jeff decides to go to Mal because Jeff says that he's basically like Mary Poppins. He says he'd stashed all sorts of things: picks, guitar strings, fuses, flashlights, crisps, potato chips, biscuits, cookies, even household items like tissues, which he'd whip out one if one of them had a cold. John must have figured out that if anyone was going to have a solution for the dilemma, Mal was. Once again, a really good use of Foley noises, whereas when I compared this in like the worst Beatles songs video, I compared it to Piggy's. Piggy's I feel like is not a great use, and this is a great use. He didn't disappoint. With a wink and a sly grin, the burly roadie reached into the bag, fished around for a moment, and cheerfully waved a condom aloft. I don't know. And I guess I am biased. I typically do give Ringo songs more. I am biased because I'll do this for every Beatles song. Holy shit, let's be real.
Well done, Malcolm, John proclaimed as the others burst into laughter. After all, we don't want the microphone to be getting in the family way, do we?
Great. That is absolutely great.
He says, the signal was so muffled and weak that it was unusable and the idea was abandoned. To my relief, the microphone was unharmed. It wasn't until many years later that I realized with horror that the microphone we were using phantom powered, meaning that it was actually a live electrical object. In conjunction with the 240 volt system used in England, any of us, including Lennon, could have easily been electrocuted, and I would have gone down in history as the first recording engineer to kill a client in the studio.
We all live in a yellow submarine.
This is a very good Ringo beat, and it's so simple. Bump.
Yellow submarine, yellow submarine.
But it is just really perfect for this song. I hate the criticism this song gets. I feel like it's so mean. It's just close-minded because it's actually like a decent song, but it's just not what you were expecting from the Beatles. Once again, me shitting on opinions. You guys can have your opinions. I'm being an asshole. I know. That dun dun with the guitar, so great. What a little simple addition that was probably just intuitive on John's part. I'm assuming that acoustic guitar is John. John Lennon, best rhythm guitarist of all time. One of, at least. Who else would you put up there, guys? I don't know a lot of everything. So let's see. Personnel. Yep, John Lennon, acoustic guitar. Bitch be knowing things. Bitch be knowing the same thing that they knew. The same thing that I knew my first week.
This is from Barry Miles many years from now. Paul McCartney says, I was laying in bed in the Asher's garret, and there's a nice twilight zone just as you're drifting into sleep, and as you wake from it, I always find it quite a comfortable zone. You're almost asleep, and you've laid your burdens down for the day, and there's this little limbo land just before you slip into sleep. I remember thinking that a children's song would be quite a good idea, and I thought of images, and the color came to me, and a submarine came to me, and I thought, well, that's kind of nice, like a toy, very childish, little yellow submarine. I was thinking of it as a song for Ringo, which eventually turned out to be, so I wrote it as to not be too rangy in the vocal. I just made up a little tune in my head, then started making a story, sort of an ancient mariner telling young kids where he lived and how there'd been a place where he had a yellow submarine. It's pretty much my song as I recall, written for Ringo in that little twilight moment. I think John helped out. The lyrics got more and more obscure as that goes on, but the chorus, melody and verses, that's the Nessie.
Every one of us.
There were funny little grammatical jokes we used to play. It should have been, every one of us has all he needs, but Ringo turned it us, every one of us has all we need, so that became the lyrics. It's wrong, but it's great. We used to love that.
And then there's weird sounds there that's like a horse running. What is that?
I know something about motors. Let me have a look.
The most action-packed first 5 seconds in music. Let's talk about a strong start. 1, 2, 3.
Eleanor Rigby. This is from Paul McCartney's The Lyrics. My mom's favorite cold cream was Nivea, and I love it to this day. That's the cold cream I was thinking of in the description of the face Eleanor keeps in a jar by the door. I was always a little scared by how often women use cold cream. Growing up, I knew a lot of old ladies, partly through what was called a Bob a Job week, when scouts did chores for a shilling.
I know that this song is intended to evoke loneliness, but to me it just goes so hard. Like,
Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where I went.
And so then he goes on to talk about this, where you would go do little odd jobs for little old ladies, like mow a yard, and you'd get a shilling. He said that one of these ladies that he talked to, he'd make this association, and he would go and get her shopping, and they'd talk and stuff.
lives in a
Hard, guys. Like, I've been saying this the whole time. I guess I'm repetitive, but Eleanor Rigby goes so hard. So he says she may have actually started with quite a different name. Daisy Hawkins, was it? I can see that Hawkins is quite nice, but it wasn't right. Jack Hawkins had played Quintus Arius and been her. Then there was Jim Hawkins from one of my favorite books, Treasure Island, but it wasn't quite right. This is the trouble with history, though. Even if you were there, which I obviously was, it's sometimes very difficult to pin down.
wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door.
I also like that line because I know that he was talking about Nivea cold cream, but also it's the face that you put on in order to go out and talk to people, to communicate with people.
Who is it for? All the lonely people.
The face that I put on to come film, the emotions that I tap into to film in order to survive day to day. I don't go around crying to everything, or else that would be difficult. You all have different faces for who you are, and then at the end of the day, you are stuck with yourself.
Where do they all come from?
And that is lonely when you're sitting there and you are stuck with yourself. This is from Keith Badman. Paul said, I was sitting at the piano when I thought of it, just like the comedian Jimmy Durant. The first few bars just came to me, and I got this name in my head, Daisy Hawkins. He decided this is the lonely old lady, and he wasn't comfortable with the name Hawkins. He said it didn't sound real enough and that he knew he could do better.
Picks up the rice in a church where a wedding has been.
Let's go back to Paul McCartney's the lyrics. He said, when I started working on the words in earnest, Eleanor was always part of the equation because we worked with Eleanor Braun on the film Help, and we knew her from The Establishment, Peter Cook's club on Greek Street. I think John might have dated her for a short while too, and I liked the name very much. Initially, the priest was Father McCartney because it had the right number of syllables. I took the song out to John around that point, and I remember playing to it, and he said, great, Father McCartney, he loved it. But I wasn't really comfortable because that's my dad, and so he says he got out the phone book and just chose Mackenzie.
Where do they all belong?
GM, sir, your talent, your intuition, sir. We are so lucky for George Martin to have whatever. My God. And a lot of the stuff that I read about him is that he didn't like being considered unimportant to the Beatles, or like a hanger-on, or like he was obsolete to the Beatles. I know that this song came out on Revolver. However, it just shows he would never be obsolete to the Beatles.
Writing the words of a sermon that no one will hear.
He says the song itself was consciously written to evoke the subject of loneliness with the hope that we could get listeners to empathize. He talks about those opening lines. Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice.
Picks up the rice in a church where a wedding has been.
He goes on to talk about Allen Ginsberg, and he says that he'd been experimenting with tape loops a lot with the Brennell reel-to-reel, which he still owns. They were starting to put more experimental elements into our song, and Eleanor Rigby ended up on the Revolver album. And for the first time, we were recording songs that couldn't be replicated on stage. Songs like this and Tomorrow Never Knows. But George Martin introduced him to the string quartet idea.
No one comes near, look at him working.
We're not going to dig into the technology here. This is not the video for that. I think that should be obviously a separate thing.
Nodding his socks in the night when there's nobody there.
Been there. It comes in handy sometimes to have some yarn around. I have darned socks. I'm sure some of you actually have. It's an interesting process. It's kind of weird. When Paul took that song to George Martin, he said that he wanted a series of E minor chord stabs. He says, I can hear a whole song in one chord. In fact, I think you can hear a whole song in one note if you listen hard enough, but nobody ever listens hard enough.
What does he care?
And from the lyrics, he says, in George's version of things, he conflates my idea of the stabs and his own inspiration by Bernard Herrmann, who had written the music for the movie Psycho. George wanted to bring some of that drama into the arrangement. And of course, there's some kind of madcap connection between Eleanor Rigby, an elderly woman left high and dry, and the mummified mother in Psycho. One thing that really shaped Paul's mindset growing up was money, the lack thereof money, the insecurity and uncertainty of a future without money. He said that he saw most divorces and domestic troubles surrounding money, and he always thought, as long as I'm financially secure, I don't have to worry about divorce, I don't have to worry about this, and this, or insecurity and uncertainty. And so he's like, these are these lonely people going home and taking care of their world and making sure that they have their socks ready for the next day at work. There are a few iterations of the Father McCartney story, with Paul going and looking through the phone book. This is from Anthology, and he says, then the name Father McCartney came to me and all the lonely people, but I thought people would think it was supposed to be my dad sitting knitting his sock, and my dad's a happy lad, so I went through the telephone and looked for the name Mackenzie. Sorry, I'm thirsty. And he also said that he was walking around Bristol one night waiting for Jane Asher, his girlfriend, and he was looking at the shop and he saw the name Rigby, which was normal, but it's got a little extra thing to it. And then he had Eleanor, so they worked with that. And then he took it down to John's house in Weybridge. They sat around, they started laughing, got stoned, and finished it off. And he said it all sort of flowed from there. And here's from an interview with Donovan. He said, Paul played me an early version of the song where the protagonist was called Old Nat. The words hadn't yet come out right for him. Paul has always thought that he came up with the name Eleanor because of having worked with Eleanor Braun in the film Help, but I'm convinced that he took the name from a gravestone in a cemetery close to Wimbledon Common where we were both walking. This name on the gravestone was Eleanor Bygraves, and Paul thought the name fitted the song. He then came back to my office and began playing it on my clavichord. Now, once again, harmonies here. I am gonna just go to Wikipedia and pull up personnel for all of these songs. Sometimes I have a really good ear for shit, and sometimes not so much, you know? Yeah. Because I was like, that sounds like George. And it is. Paul also says in one of those like 15 question Wired interview things, he says the same thing where he's heard that too. He might have taken it. He doesn't remember that. You know, multiple things can be true.
Eleanor Rigby died in the church and was buried.
I definitely skip over a lot of stuff for Eleanor Rigby, and I will come back to that at a later date. But I think one of my favorite quotes about it is John Lennon. He says, Eleanor Rigby was Paul's baby, and I helped with the education of the child.
Nobody can.
You know what? We're gonna name the additional musicians in this song. I think they deserve it. Tony Gilbert on violin, Sidney Sachs on violin, John Sharp on violin, Jürgen Hess on violin, Stephen Shingles on viola, John Underwood on viola, Derek Simpson on cello, Norman Jones on cello, and George Martin, the string arrangement and conducting. Blah, 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 blah. John does take a little bit of credit with Eleanor Rigby. He says the first verse was his, Paul's, and the rest are basically mine. He knew he had a song, but by that time he didn't want to ask for my help, and we were sitting around with Mal Evans and Neil Aspinall, so he said to us, hey, you guys, finish up the lyrics. I was there with Mal and Neil, and I was insulted and hurt that Paul had just thrown it out in the air. He actually meant he wanted me to do it, and of course there isn't a line of theirs in the song, because I finally went off to a room with Paul and we finished the song. So there's that.
Wiping the dirt from his hands as he walks from the grave.
I think sometimes he likes versions and he just sticks with them because it's fun. I think sometimes, I'm gonna say it. I think sometimes he finds that one of his versions is something that Yoko likes, so he takes it and builds on it. I'm gonna say that. I think that John uses narratives to protect himself from the world, and we have to understand that John, he has a different memory of things. He tells different stories of things. I like to do my best to tell all of what John says and what everybody else says, because generally that's how we find the accurate depiction.
No one was saved.
But I still think there's truth in a lot of things that John says. There's just, you have to put it on through the filter. You have to be able to read it and extract the truth and kind of move this way and this way and this way. But you're also interpreting that. So you're flawed in your interpretation. I mean me. So you have to do your best because he's erratic. His memory could be extremely erratic, was to take credit in one of his last interviews. My own recollection is that Eleanor Rigby was one Lennon-McCartney classic in which John's contribution was virtually nil.
Where do they all belong?
Huh. Damn.
That's all. What's the matter, fellas? Blue meanies.
All together now. Now, let's get all together now. This is Paul's acoustic guitar. It is aggressive, and I love that.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Once again, this is a really strong Paul vocal. Putting Yellow Submarine and back to my track list or whatever, Yellow Submarine, then Eleanor Rigby, then All Together Now feels almost is it devaluing the 4 new tracks? I don't know. We're gonna keep going with the way.
Can I have a little more?
Something that Barry Miles addresses in Paul McCartney many years from now. The public kind of had a feeling, hey, we need something a little bit better than you throwing Yellow Submarine at us.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
10, I love you. Sorry.
And they might have had a good point. He says, and this isn't necessarily my feeling because I have only positive feelings about Magical Mystery Tour. So just remember I'm quoting someone, but I think that this is a point that we can take into consideration.
10, I love you. A, B, C, D.
How many caveats do I need to make for me to feel safe having an opinion around my own goddamn land? Me yelling at my 95% incredibly positive comment section, but I get very mad at the petty fogger. Petty.
E, F, G, H, I, J, I love you.
Oh, it's bum bum bum, duh. I don't know why I said oh.
The Beatles were Apple's greatest asset, and they began recording their first album for their own label not long after the record division was set up. There had not been a proper Beatles album since Sgt. Pepper. Magical Mystery Tour had only 6 new tracks and didn't really count. There had also been a soundtrack album to the cartoon film Yellow Submarine, but that only had 2 new Beatles tracks on it, Paul's All Together Now and John's Hey Bulldog.
Sail the ship.
Bum bum bum.
So it makes sense that people are like, dude, hello. All Together Now was a number in the music hall tradition.
Skip the rope.
Cherry chapstick. Listen for the lady screaming in the chorus. It's not screaming, it's just singing. But the word screaming came up in one of my sources. It's Patty Boyd. Pattie. I don't know if that's come up yet. No, it hasn't, but it will. Paul says, when they were singing a song to encourage the audience to join in, they'd say all together now. So I just took it and read another meaning into it of we are all together now.
All together now, all together now, all together now.
Screaming? Really? Anyway, I don't know if I would say screaming. I would say singing.
So I used the dual meaning. It's really a children's song. I had a few young relatives and I would sing songs for them. I used to do songs for kids called Jumping Around the Room, very similar to All Together Now.
Black, white, green, red.
Can I take my friend to bed? I love that. I love the little dirty lines in Beatles songs. I know that this was not out of the ordinary by All Together Now, but it's just it's always a good time.
And then it would be lying on your backs and all the kids would have a lie down and there would be skipping around the room. You know, I'm making shit up. It's a play away command song for children. It would be in G, very, very simple chords, only a couple chords. So that's what this is. There's a little subcurrent to it, but it's just a sing along really, a bit of a throwaway.
Orange and blue, I love you.
I always felt like the way he says orange is so weird, but it's, you know, because I'm an American.
So Jeff Emmerich talks about All Together Now. He says that in mid-May of 1967, I believe, George Martin had taken a 2-week vacation.
All together now.
Try to listen to see who I can hear the best, which I feel like is John and George.
And he says, frankly, George going on vacation in the middle of these sessions did not go well in anyone's book. We were all tired, and yet he was the only one taking any time off. By this point, I doubt very much if the band were crediting George Martin with their success anyway. In fact, they probably welcomed the opportunity to get some work done without him. So it was very much like,
Together now, all together now.
What do you think?
oh, the schoolmaster is gone, and they would kind of pick away at him and blah, blah, blah. He says that the boys were a little bit more relaxed without him around.
Yeah, that's George on the deep end and John right in the middle. So John Lennon said, well, now that the schoolmaster's out, we kids can finally have a chance to play. And he says, interestingly, the last time the Beatles had done a recording in George's absence was the song Yellow Submarine during the Revolver sessions, which was remarkably similar to All Together Now in both content and style. And both times the Beatles invited friends to sing along and create a party atmosphere. I think that's easy to hear them. Ooh, yeah, you can really hear George's accent here. Paul had obviously worked the song out well in advance and knew exactly what he wanted. All the singing and playing is spot on, despite the fact that it's not that strong of a song. Ultimately, it was relegated to the Yellow Submarine film. Still, it was a remarkably productive night, and it was quite an early session, too, even though there were a lot of overdubs. So it does sound like a lot of fun, even though, like they said, there was a lot of overdubs. So a lot of redoing it, but it is still just very much that party atmosphere.
The hills are alive.
I've got senioritis. This is a jolly old tune, and I know that we're all gonna always get made fun of for liking the grandma songs. If you like the grandma songs, sue me.
When I get older, losing my hair.
I really love this song, and I don't really have anything on it, so what I'm going to talk about instead is Ringo and his little Yellow Submarine related faux pas.
Birthday greetings, bottle of wine.
Paul's voice is so clear here. He sounds so young. You would not consider this really when was When I'm 64 recorded? So When I'm 64 came out on Sgt. Pepper. So it was recorded December 1966. So he's still very young, but he still sounds incredibly young here.
Birthday greetings, bottle of wine.
This is from Alan Clayson's Ringo Starr, Straight Man or Joker. In 1983, Ringo did a 26-part series entitled Ringo's Yellow Submarines, A Voyage Through the Beatles' Magic by a U.S. radio syndication network whose vice president, Willard Lockridge, had crowned him being, quote, the DJ, working intimately with ABC on the content and presentation.
If I'd been out till 2:45.
As disappointing to fans as Ringo's undignified decision to participate, his pre-recorded and scripted commentaries, plus a culminant live phone-in from Tittenhurst Park, were peppered unthinkingly with tiny factual errors as he endorsed the group's function as a commodity that could be recycled indefinitely.
Would you lock the door?
If we're associating songs that took a big role in the Yellow Submarine movie with the album at all, When I'm 64 should have been on it.
Will you still need me? Will you still feed me?
It's just interesting to me what they chose versus what they didn't, I guess. But then again, what is gonna make me happy? Literally nothing.
When I'm 64.
He says, perhaps I've misread his motives. His surrender of no fresh anecdotes or weighing of experience might have been quite deliberate. Maybe they'll be revealed if he authorizes a biography or more than likely writes one himself. I think he's misread his motives. And somehow the piano, some vocalizing, and horns become dramatic and still feel rocky here. That's nice, but it's still, I don't know what the edge is there, but it is there.
If you say the word.
I'm not gonna lie, I think it's in the piano. Let's see, clarinet. Yeah, I mean, it's gotta be in the clarinets, man.
I could stay with you.
That ding, I much appreciate that. It's just those little touches make the song just a little bit more special. I think that Ringo's decision to keep certain things to the vest has been quite deliberate. I think a lot of people fail to ask Ringo good questions or interview Ringo well in any way, shape, or form. A lot of people don't take a chance to get to know Ringo as a person before they go and have interviews with him.
When your lights have gone,
But Ringo is notoriously kind of weird around interviews. He doesn't like to talk about losing John. He will not talk about Harry. I think people are shit interviewers with him. That's one thing. But I think I was speaking specifically of his motives to not reveal new information. I think his motives were probably just money. You know, there you go.
Sunday mornings go for a ride.
It's really cute. I think from what I remember, Paul wrote this when he was young. Yeah, around the age of 14. It's a cute little ditty or whatever, but I think it is just such a sweet song, and it's got a wisdom to it that you kind of don't often find with Paul.
Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
This honesty that I think is probably more easily accessible at the age of 14 than the age of 22, 24. It's 24.
Every summer we can rent a cottage in the Isle of Wight.
I love that, where it's like, hey, don't worry, we're getting older or whatever, but look at all these fun little things that we're going to be able to do if it's something that we can handle. And so there's still like this reality. If it's not too dear.
We shall scream and say.
Now, of course, that line is so gorgeous. It's really sweet. It's like, we can do this if we work on it. We can scrimp and save. And then this just outrageous harmony with George and John. Just, oh my God, wait a minute. It's like an octopus. It's like an octopus. No, I didn't even think about the Ringo thing. I've been watching a lot of sci-fi movies, okay? Just whatever. Also, give me your sci-fi movie recommendations, sci-fi TV recommendations. Come on, throw them at me. I don't mind subtitles. What was I gonna say? But it crawls. It's like okay. So let's come up with a more original thing. It's like a vine crawling over this really pretty stained glass window that was left outside to be a fence. What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, I heard it. I didn't respond to it, but, you know, if we're in the spirit of honesty is the best policy, I think it wasn't your best.
There's always something absolutely magnetic about the John and Paul harmony. So it starts out with this haunting thing. You hear John, and then it gets more complex again. And then we switch to this, that goes so high.
Vera, Chuck, and Dave.
Cannot get past the clarinets, my God. Robert Burns, Henry McKenzie, and Frank Reedy. Y'all are killing it.
Send me a postcard.
The humor that is conveyed through the music and with Paul's voice is just so great here. I mean, it really is.
You're sincerely wasting away.
Okay, I'm sitting here bopping. I'm really enjoying it. But thinking about when it came out on Sgt. Pepper, I'm surprised people like it. You know what I mean? It's just so, conservative, I feel like. But there's something just so absolutely magnetic about it to me.
Will you still need me? Will you still feed me?
I'm a sucker for any sort of mess ups, any sort of giggles, anything like that. So we kind of hear it here.
I'm 64.
We should call a road service. Come, no road. And we're not subscribers. Subscribers.
Only a northern song. This is from All the Songs with the author's names on screen because you know I'm not pronouncing that. George originally wrote Only a Northern Song for Sgt. Pepper. Unfortunately, it was considered too weak for the album, so we had to write another song, Within You Without You. Only a Northern Song is Asian in style and under the spell of India in its music. By writing Only a Northern Song, George was also attacking the Beatles' music publishing company, Northern Songs Limited, which had managed the Beatles' copyright since February 22, 1963. At the company's creation in 1963, the stock was divided among Dick James, Charles Silver, Brian Epstein, John, and Paul.
If you're listening to this song.
Damn, that sounds really good. So George is playing the Hammond organ, an additional organ, dialogue, and noises. John plays the glockenspiel, piano, dialogue, and noises. Paul plays bass, trumpet, and noises, drums, and noises from Ringo. And uncredited, played by the Beatles, are timpani, the mellotron, and additional percussion, whatever that means. I loved this song the first time I heard it. I've loved it ever since. I think it is so cheeky. George and Ringo were left out, and only on February 18th, 1965, when the company went public, did they finally become a part of it, receiving just over 1% of the shares. In 1965, George signed a new 3-year contract with Northern Songs. Over the years, he had been wronged, and he admitted in 1999, "I realized Dick James had conned me out of the copyrights for my own songs by offering to become my publisher, but he never said, and incidentally, when you sign this document here, you're assigning me the ownership of the song." George wrote only a Northern Song as a joke, denouncing the exploitation of which he considered himself a victim. It sounds like the chords are going perfectly right to me. I wonder if just the understanding or like the evolution of music was just different then, because it didn't sound that weird to me when I first heard it.
He just wrote it like that.
George says, "In Only a Northern Song, I complained that it didn't really matter what I wrote because the bulk of the money we earned was going in other people's pockets." Not to mention these like additional sounds here with what seems like sound effects, but it's obviously drums, noises, timpani, additional percussion. It just sounds like audio glitter. And George also said Only a Northern Song was a joke relating to Liverpool, the holy city in the north of England. In addition, the song is copyrighted by Northern Songs Limited, which I don't own, so it doesn't really matter what chords I play as long as it's only a Northern song.
When you're listening late at night.
Ooh. I don't think that's a
But they are. They just play it like that.
Al Brodex has a little bit of an interesting story regarding Only a Northern Song, so I just like to tell it because I like Al. The bass is really doing it for me, Paul. You're really doing it for me here. When Apple began to occupy the Beatles' attention, they had little time for the cartoon feature. The songwriting for Submarine was a last-minute effort. At 2 o'clock in the morning in EMI's studio with "This is obviously not true." He just lies. This is not true because Only a Northern Song was done for Pepper.
Doesn't really matter what chords I play.
In these lyrics, I know that people have like said, oh, he was complaining, whining, whinging, whatever. In EMI's studio with the London Symphony Orchestra patiently waiting to go home, we were still one song short for the film. George told me to sit tight while he knocked out another. After an hour or two, he returned to the studio with the final song. "Here, Al, it's only a Northern Song." I have to say that if you dyed your hair in 1968, George, it would have mattered. It would have mattered a lot. If he went blonde, a lot of boys would have gone blonde. If he went a color, like an unnatural color, that would have been bad. I mean, not for him, but like upheaval. This is from all the songs. On February 13th, 3 days after recording the orchestra for A Day in the Life, the Beatles started recording Only a Northern Song under the working title Not Known. Although they made 9 takes of the rhythm track, the best was the 3rd. Ringo was on drums and Paul was on bass, connected to a DI box. Most likely, John played electric guitar while George played the organ. The following day, George overdubbed 2 lead vocals. There were a total of 12 takes. On April 20th, 2 months later, the Beatles reworked the piece after they had completed Sgt. Pepper. So obviously cannot be the last song made for Yellow Submarine because that would be in the spring of 1968. It's like, dude, come on. I don't know the history of hair dye in music, okay? But I feel like if one of the Beatles dyed their hair, that would have caused a ruckus. Not how Paul dyed his hair for far, far, far too long, sir. Finally, we're going a normal color, Mr. I think 2016 in that Wired interview, please, Paul. And obviously Ringo, who's just never going to give up the goose, right? Like, it's fine. But ultimately,
If he dyed his hair in 1968, that would have been a big issue. Or 1966, or whatever year this was that they made it. Scroll up, scroll up, scroll up. February 13th and 14th and April 20th, 1967. So in a contemporary article, according to that Mojo Special Limited Edition magazine, I don't know if I've mentioned it yet, I probably have. It said that Only a Northern Song and It's All Too Much were superb pieces that redeemed side one of the track. Record Mirror's reviewer said that whereas most of the songs were simple Beatles stuff, that Only a Northern Song appeared to be a technical experiment in how many off-key variations on a solid background tune one can get in, while still maintaining a reasonable amount of finesse, and it comes off very well. Nicholas Schaffner dismissed the tracks as one of the trifling baubles that the Beatles provide for the film. I think it's great.
You're correct. There's nobody there.
They discarded the vocals from February 14th, and in their place added bass, trumpet, and glockenspiel. Paul says, I remember playing a silly trumpet my dad used to play, but I can't, but I can mess around a lot, and the song gave me the perfect framework. It was very tongue-in-cheek. After adding all these instruments, they used the new take and the 11th take from February 14th, and the two versions were mixed together and synced to produce the final mono version. The result is rather dissonant, but reflects George's dissatisfaction with Northern Songs Limited. The mono mix was made the following day and reflects the stereo mix on October 29th, 1968. Like, there's some stuff right around here that becomes, like, pretty experimental. And just some technical details here. Because the engineers were unable to have both tape recorders begin the playback at the exact same time, they had difficulty mixing the stereo version. Therefore, they created a fake stereo mix by expanding the sound. I will say it's a good call that this was released after the White Album. I love hearing George's accent and vocals. George's vocals. George's Harrison singing. Hit something in my brain. There is a lot going on here, but it is, you know, like they said, it's experimental. I just was there. I saw something on the page. The song's release coincided with a pyramid of acrimony between Dick James and the Beatles. This is from Lewison. This is from that same fucking article. I need to read that. The song's release coincided with a pyramid. It's like a $16 thing. I think it might be like $25 to buy that. So I don't know. The song's release coincided with a period of acrimony between Dick James and the Beatles, particularly Lennon and McCartney, about whom Lewison writes, if John and Paul still thought they owned their songs following the flotation of Northern songs, they were deluding themselves.
This motor, I see, has a broken down thing.
He's a real nowhere man.
Like I said about When I'm 64, I think if we were going to dig back into the Beatles catalog for songs that were representative of Yellow Submarine, this would probably have been the one that you should have added, which is Nowhere Man.
Sitting in his nowhere land.
That just seems like an obvious addition. It was so weird to realize, oh, that's not on there. Huh. But then of course it's not, because these are the new songs, the unreleased songs, the whatever songs, right? And Nowhere Man is obviously older, but it just feels weird, and it's a huge chunk of Yellow Submarine to me.
Nowhere man is for nobody.
It starts out very simple and very immediately catchy. Sad lyrics, not a sad song. This is an interview with Heinz Edelman and Dr. Bob. Major sources here. Heinz Edelman being, once again, the artist for Yellow Submarine. He says, I felt the script that we were supposed to be working with did not do justice to what the Beatles were actually becoming. So you know, from the original script, I think only 2 names were kept. The name of Old Fred occurs in sort of a maritime story. One obviously had to have some crafty old salt. And then the name of the boob character, at least what was kept was that. There was a list of the music that should be in the film, and it was determined that Nowhere Man should be in the film, and that Nowhere Man should be called the boob.
And Dr. Bob says, yes, J. Hillary Boob Fudd. Hines says, he was just called the Boob. Dr. Bob says, oh, the Boob, without the PhD. Hines says, without any first name. And Dr. Bob says, oh, without any first name. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of the Fool, the tarot card, which is not always a negative thing, you know, it's a naivete toward the world. And sometimes you're going into something with really a fool's amount of hope that this thing is gonna work out. And that kind of vibes with some of the Nowhere Man messaging, but that would be my interpretation, because obviously what we're hearing from John and Paul, very different from that. And just those little bits from George, those little guitar licks, really subtle, really necessary. Of course, Nowhere Man is absolutely captivating when it comes to the harmonies. It's so good. From all the songs. Hiding out at home and totally uninspired after 5 hours, John was still struggling to write a new song for Rubber Soul. I'd actually stopped trying to think of something. Nothing would come off. I was cheesed off and went for a lie down, having given up. Then I thought of myself as a nowhere man sitting in this nowhere land. Nowhere Man came, words and music, the whole damn thing. So letting it go is what the whole game is. And now we see George be able to take his actual spot in this song, and it's great. He's as blind as he can be. This is such a bop. Oh my god. This is just a, you know, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to do. Nowhere man, can you see me at all? I'm getting lost in the trap of their harmonies together. Ringo is so understated and just so absolutely necessary. I mean, so necessary. He's so quiet, but it's... In 1980, John explained to David Sheff that writing is, quote, like being possessed, like a psychic or a medium. The thing has to go down. It won't let you sleep, so you have to get up, make it into something, and then you're allowed to sleep. Paul recognized that Nowhere Man was one of John's best songs, but in describing the song, he also contradicted himself. In 1997, Paul McCartney, many years from now, I've read that, he recalled that John said he'd written it about himself, feeling like he wasn't going anywhere. I think it was actually about the state of his marriage with Cynthia. 3 years later, however, in Anthology, the same Paul declared that Nowhere Man, quote, was about me and not about John. It was about me, end quote. I said this about John, but this is also true for Paul. Things are different. George says this and this. Paul says this and this. This is why I read from multiple places. It's a little switch up. Just a little switch up, just a little baby switch up. And I don't know, it's just a vibe. I hope he knew. John's vocal was both intimate and universal. Who has not felt like this Nowhere Man at one time or another in life? John showed his true talent for bringing us into his vision of the world. Strawberry Fields were not too far away. Y'all seeing this shit? You seeing this shit? What are we supposed to do with ourselves when this exists? Production notes. On October 21st, the Beatles made their first unsuccessful attempt to record the rhythm track. The next day, take 5 was acceptable. Ringo played the drums, John his Jumbo J160E, and Paul the bass. George and John later used their Fender Stratocaster Sonic Blues. They probably played the melody and the guitar solo together on a track reserved for them. George reported in a 1995 interview, I played the Stratocaster a lot in that album, most noticeably the solo on Nowhere Man, where John and I both played in unison. Paul told Mark Lewison that he wanted high-pitched guitars as high as possible. The engineers were reluctant, but put 3 times the allowed value of treble in the song and obtained the desired effect. Quote, they're among the most trebly guitars I've ever heard on record, said Paul. Sorry, this is just such an addictive song to listen to, and listening to John's voice and the journey it takes just over one line is so absolutely enthralling. It's
It's so, consuming.
Let us not forget that heaven is blue.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. We're gonna wrap it up really quick. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is not about LSD. Okay. Take it easy.
Picture yourself in a boat on a river.
Take it easy. It's not about that. It is literally about a drawing that Julian Lennon brought to John Lennon of his classmate Lucy O'Donnell, who actually tragically died at the age of 46 in 2009 from lupus. He drew her and John liked the drawing and he said that he decided to make a song about it immediately. People freaked. Everybody was like, no, he's for sure lying about this. Now, here's the thing.
Marmalade skies.
And so then we're suddenly transforming into a different song with this drone coming in here. I feel like if John was lying, he would have come out about it eventually because he likes to tell fun stories. And I don't think he'd care. It wouldn't be something to hide, you know? But I actually think the getting it from a drawing from his son is a better story than it standing for LSD, because their other songs were literally just so LSD inspired that they didn't need to be so on the nose about it. I know I keep saying that John lies, so I'm not trying to contradict myself, but he just is so insistent on this one. It just feels like, okay, guys, let it go. And then we gotta back it up so we can listen to it all the way through. I'm not the only one who thinks that, okay? Ringo says, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and all that madness that went on around it was absolutely bonkers. I was actually with John when Julian came in with this little kid's painting, a crazy little painting, and John, as the dad, said, oh, what's that? And Julian said, it's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and then John got busy. Paul said, I showed up at John's house and he had a drawing Julian had done at school with the title of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds above it. And then we went up to his music room and wrote the song, swapping psychedelic suggestions as we went. I remember coming up with cellophane flowers in newspaper taxis, and John answered with things like kaleidoscope eyes and looking glass ties. We never noticed the LSD initial until it was pointed out later, by which point people didn't believe us. There is nothing like their harmonies, these two. Just the two of them. I love it when George is in there. I love it when you can hear him. You can't hear him. He doesn't vocalize in this song. But when it's just the two of them, there is something very, very unmistakably magical that is different than what it is when the three or all four of them are singing. It is very different.
It's by a fountain where rocking horse people.
Those lyrics are great. Rocking horse people eat marshmallow pies. Rocking horse people would be a perfect addition to a Lewis Carroll story. Unless if it's already in a Lewis Carroll story. I have not really... Alice in Wonderland was read to me as a child, okay?
Everyone smiles as you drink.
John says, I saw Mel Torme introducing a Lennon-McCartney show saying how Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was about LSD. It never was, and nobody believes me. I swear to God, or I swear to Mao, or swear to anybody you like, I had no idea it spelled LSD. This is the truth. My son... And then here we have another change. I feel like this is like the one time he's like so insistent. He's like, guys, no, really. This is how I read it. Sorry, but I don't care what you think. I think it's hilarious. And if you don't think it's hilarious, you know, that sounds like a skill issue. All of this is guided in with George's guitar, right?
Waiting to take you away.
Can't forget the bass walking us through this new adventure.
I'm in the back with your head in the clouds and you're gone.
This is the truth. My son came home with a drawing showing me this strange looking woman flying around. I said, oh, what is it? And he said, it's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And I thought, that's beautiful. And I immediately wrote a song about it. And the song had gone out. And of course, after that, I was checking all the songs to see what the letters spelled out. And they didn't spell out anything. None of the others. And it wasn't about that at all. The images were from Alice in Wonderland. It was Alice in the boat. She is buying an egg and she turns into Humpty Dumpty. The woman serving in the shop turns into a sheep. And the next minute, they're rowing in a rowing boat somewhere. And I was visualizing that. And there was also the image of the female who would someday come save me, a girl with kaleidoscope eyes who would come out of the sky. It's not an acid song. You know, sometimes I try not to like do stupid shit. I try not to just perform where I'm like singing to you guys to like be cute or like whatever for like TikTok vibes. I don't try to do that. Why not just jam out when I'm alone and it's just me and the cats really. And I'm just like, my partner's at work. I don't have any interviews for this morning. Go. That's what I try to do. When I'm here with you guys, because it is nice that I can't see your facial reactions. Why not, you know? And here's George's input. He says, I like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds a lot. John always had a way of having an edge to his songs. I particularly liked the sounds where I managed to superimpose some Indian instruments onto the Western music, Within You, Without You, to try to feature the Indian instruments, but under normal circumstances, that wouldn't work on a Western song like Lucy, which has chord changes and modulations, whereas tamboras and sitar stay in the same key forever. I liked the way the drone of the tambora could be fitted in there. John's voice. I just can't get over the fact that he didn't like his own voice. Isn't it wonderful? Here's Eric Siegel, the main writer of the script of Yellow Submarine, as I've introduced. He said this: I would go from the classroom to the airport, from my Yaleys to the Beatles, and the kids would give me questions like, ask John Lennon what this word means in Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And he once freaked out on that. And he said to me, why don't they stop? I'm not the Holy Scriptures. I just write off the top of my head. I don't have any meanings. Don't interpret me like the Bible. And he was very upset. And I was upset because he actually shrieked. God, Eric Siegel is so iconic. He really is. Right now, their harmony vocals sounds like there's 82 people. It's powerful. Ooh, underwater suddenly? It's...
You mean you take a nowhere man?
Yeah, come on, we'll take you somewhere.
All You Need Is Love. I don't have notes for this. All You Need Is Love is generally difficult for me to listen to at this point because I did a video on it and I've reacted to it a couple times since then. I feel like I repeat the same stuff every single time. It's a little bit of a challenge and hopefully I can do a good job. But I really do love this song. All You Need Is Love was a song that literally the Beatles knocked off really quick. Brian said, hey, guess what? I'm going to have you do the first worldwide broadcast live with a new song. You have to do a new song, new record like this. They didn't want to do it. They were kind of annoyed. It didn't really mean very much to them. So John wrote All You Need Is Love. They had a couple other contenders. And the strings are so rich and beautifully captured here. When you listen to it, you don't immediately think Beatles. No context whatsoever. You wouldn't immediately think this is the Beatles. Not at first. And I can't really blame myself because listen to that. You know, it's this one way, it's very classical. The Beatles were less enthusiastic about the All You Need Is Love live performance than they were about Yellow Submarine. I'm not kidding. They did not give a crap about this. It was definitely something where they rolled their eyes and they hurt Brian's feelings about it. There were two options. I'm not gonna pull it off the top of my head, but it was one of Paul's songs and then also All You Need Is Love. This was the better option and it's such a universal message. but it wound up being a really good song for this. It was literally during a war, which impacted the actual broadcast, and the guys were nervous. They played live, and the orchestra were actually pre-recorded, but the orchestra played live in studio. They had no idea that they weren't going live. And John gave it quite a bit of criticism later years, saying that he didn't know what love was. And I think he absolutely did know what love was, but his definition of love, the depth of love, changed over the years. The definition changed. But I do believe John understood love in his own way before, 1970 whatever. So listen to this backing track harmony, and then underneath this escalating orchestration, which is not George Martin's composition. This was such an important performance that they had to have George Martin in the booth. So they had someone else, I think someone Vickers maybe, orchestrate this, and he was very upset when he realized that the Beatles are not big on doling out compliments. In that way, they are very British. So when they hear something that they like, they go, oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's good, yeah. So they might be a lot more impressed than you think. Jesus, I keep getting excitable with my fingers. But they're still, they're reserved. So the big compliments mean a lot more. And it's easy to feel a little insecure when you're not getting those. Oh, okay. So here's George's solo, and he was so nervous about this. I think I talked about it before, sorry. It's such a groovy little guitar bit, but then the strings just take over in like a rush of wings almost. At this point, the joy in the performance starts to come in because the boys were really actually very nervous about this. There was a lot running on this. There was no lip syncing. So while the orchestra was, like I said, dubbed, they were live and there was a lot riding on this. And even though they didn't want to do it, they were still nervous. So once George got past his solo and they kind of got in the groove, we start hearing Paul in his exclamations, which were part of the song anyway, but it's definitely coming from a real place. And then the difference in the harmony here in the second chorus keeps it from being so repetitive and expected. Ringo originally wasn't supposed to drum live, but he did wind up drumming live. I covered this in my video on it. So if you want to watch my more in-depth video on All You Need Is Love, I love that video. I think that's my favorite video that I've ever made, or one of them. It's a really interesting story, and I'm very sentimental about it because it's one of my favorite videos. I don't know. I love thinking about it, talking about it, listening to it, all that good stuff. And that's the piano from George Martin under there, and damn, it's so good. I believe that's added later on. I don't know. Oof, I love this crescendo here. Waiting for the beat to drop, right? And somehow to me, this does not get repetitive at all right here. Not at all. Listen to all of the complex layers here. And there's not only all of this harmony, but there's different bass tracks, different vibes, different textures, and it's somehow not getting any stickier. It's not getting overdone. The call and response harmonies change ever so slightly each time, just ever so slightly, and it brings you in each time. Like it is genius. Just tiny, tiny variations. And underneath this, there's the strings that are really insane underneath that almost sounds like crickets. And on top of that, Glenn Miller, crickets, crazy horns, the Beatles. What is this? Love Is All You Need. Isn't that bizarre? July 1967. June? Something like that. I love this part. And I don't think it matters that the orchestra was dubbed. I know that they sounded just as beautiful on the day of. They were obviously capable of sounding like this, but I do understand why they decided not to take the risk, though. Those strings in there come in a way that are not expected, I would say. Now, none of this is expected, like I just said, but I just scratched my forehead and I guarantee it's gonna make it red. Okay, whatever. We're gonna go. Weird turn of events here. And then, of course, Paul comes in and John sings She Loves You, which is so sweet. And I appreciate that as it's fading out, the orchestra, the instruments are getting more and more chaotic and they're going harder than ever. They're not stopping because the music is fading away. They're continuing on. Still with the Glenn Miller. I love that reference. I found out about who Glenn Miller was from The Golden Girls, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. Watched that shit on Lifetime growing up.
Liverpool can be a lonely place on a Saturday night. And this is only Thursday morning.
Because it's nasty, it's dirty, it's horny. I mean, come on. That's like I Want You So Bad vibes. You're like, come on now.
This is from Mark Hertzgaard. The one diamond in the rough of Yellow Submarine was Hey Bulldog, a great growling rocker recorded just days before the Beatles left for India in February 1968. All four Beatles play this Lennon composition with tight, ferocious intensity, whiplashing its simple groove to a fever pitch.
All right, I am standing, which I never do. For the music parts, I'm usually like sitting. And I do dance a little bit. I have really bad knees. It's a long story. Thank you, genetics. I'm gonna try to stand as long as I can, but I do dance as usual. Just like, if you're gonna lay into me, don't lay into me for my bad pronunciation. Lay into me for my bad moves.
I picked this description because it is just so perfect. You'll see what I mean. The barking and maniacal laughing between John and Paul during the fade out not only confirmed the engineer Jeff Emmerich's recollection of the session as really fun, they also indicate how fond of each other the Beatles still were at this point. John Lennon used to say that the songs of the Beatles were nothing more nor less than the folk music of the electronic age. This truth is reflected in the fact that countless millions of people from all generations and walks of life, not to mention widely diverse cultures and countries, have enthusiastically applauded the Beatles' music over the years. This response is partly a tribute to the Beatles' extraordinary creative range, offering everything from sweaty rock and roll tunes like I Saw Her Standing There and touching love songs like Here, There, and Everywhere to inspiring anthems like All You Need Is Love and children's sing-alongs like Yellow Submarine to mind-bending psychedelia like Tomorrow Never Knows and masterful social commentary like A Day in the Life meant that there was something for everyone in the Beatles' repertoire.
This is really interesting because the song has such a different vibe than what John's vocals are, and then Paul brings it back so it fits together. This song reminds me of Chocolate. I don't know if it's just because of the vibes from the video. You can talk to Hang on. You can talk to me. You can talk to me. Sometimes it's hard to tell because they turn into a lot of combinations when they're together. Hang on. You can talk to me. I know I get a lot of shit sometimes when I mess songs up, but it's because the three of them can make their voices sound like a lot of different things. There's one song where it's just Paul and George, and I could swear that John is in there, and he's not.
In addition, the Beatles never forsook the common vernacular. Unlike modern composers of classical music, the Beatles spoke in a language that the broad public could understand, and they spoke about things that mattered. They thought that making the world a better place was important, and their music encouraged people to take heart and join in, without lapsing into the stridency that afflicts so many self-consciously political artists. The Beatles spread values of love, justice, and liberation that not only contributed to such immediate political change as ending the Vietnam War, but also helped foster a revolution in attitudes and behavior whose after effects are still visible. Like many folk poets, the Beatles were political rebels, but because their music was so widely beloved, they got away with it.
This is like a perfect example of well-placed, simple things. That tambourine is just,
Pretty good, huh? This is from all the songs. On February 11th, the Beatles were being filmed in Studio 3 for a promotional video for Lady Madonna. Hunter Davies recounted how Paul tried working on an unfinished piece. John, who had written the main structure of a new song, proposed filming that instead of Lady Madonna. According to Jeff Emmerich, Paul was a bit annoyed, but John was like a steamroller that day, and the decision stuck.
Interesting combination of textures there that works really well and gives this song a little bit of flavor to it that takes it out of that old school genre feeling. And that kind of improvisational chatter is really bringing in this extra groove that wasn't quite there before.
The Beatles were in a good mood, creating a joyful atmosphere because they knew that they would be heading to Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's ashram in India in a few days. The lyrics changed during the session. The original idea, Bullfrog, was abandoned in favor of Bulldog after Paul made a barking sound during the session that pleased John. The sheepdog in the song was the same breed as Paul's famous dog, Martha.
You can talk to me.
I have to say that growing up, when I didn't know the lyrics to the rest of the song, I thought that it said, "You can't talk to me." And so I thought it was like, fuck off, fuck off, fuck off for so long that when I found out, probably pretty early, I would say, into my Beatlemania, that I realized it was "You Can Talk to Me," and I was like, that is devastating for me.
You can talk to me.
John's song was destined for the soundtrack of Yellow Submarine. They wanted another song, so I knocked off Hey Bulldog. It's a good sounding record that means nothing. The recording was a success, taking even the Beatles themselves by surprise. Emmerich remembered that John tried in vain to make the title the A-side of the single instead of Lady Madonna. Hey Bulldog is probably one of the most underrated titles by the group, which I agree with, and it should have been the A-side. Don't you agree with me? Come on now.
You can talk to me.
I didn't even know, I wasn't paying attention to the rest of the song at all. I just thought, I'm stupid is what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. However, I was heartbroken that it wasn't
Image mistakes. The video clip of Lady Madonna came from the footage of the Beatles recording Hey Bulldog, and nobody noticed the discrepancy. Many years later, Neil Aspinall had the video recut to the song Hey Bulldog. This video clip is the only one showing the Beatles recording something in Studio 3 at Abbey Road.
It does have an ability to be a cutting song, though. This could be a diss track. It's not, but it could be. Ugh. Why do they have to do it so good, though?
Production. The Beatles recorded and mixed Hey Bulldog in less than 10 hours on February 11th. They made no intermediate reduction and were satisfied with 4 basic rhythm tracks. A very determined John led his friends into a supercharged session. 10 takes were needed to complete the rhythm track. John was at the Steinway B piano used previously for Lady Madonna. Paul played tambourine, George was on his Gibson SG Standard, and Ringo was on drums. Paul recorded recorded on the second track one of his most inventive and effective bass lines using his Rickenbacker 4001S. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I apologize. Meanwhile, George double-tracked his riff while Ringo played drums with a strong reverb in the middle eight. Then John recorded his lead vocal on a third track, accompanied by Paul's backing vocals. At the coda, they performed all together a surrealistic passage consisting of barking, howling, and clowning. They were happy and inseparable friends for one of the last times.
They do a pretty good job. I'm not picky about similarities in sounds. I just think it shows the fun to me.
The following years would be less cheerful. On the last track, John double-tracked his vocal and George performed a sparkling solo, double-tracked as well. His amp was turned up very loud with the encouragement of his friends. In the mix, the song is slightly sped up. The stereo mix was only made on October 29th, 1968. And for Beatles fanatics, Hey Bulldog is the final recording session where only the four Beatles were together in the studio. Afterwards, Yoko became a permanent fixture in their private circle. And Paul says, I helped him finish it off in the studio, but mainly it's his vibe. There's a little rap at the end between John and I, and we went into a crazy little thing at the end.
Woo! That starts to sound a little like, I'm just cutting in. We're just cutting in right now. This is so, I already said the chocolate thing. John's voice sounds like velvet. They are going crazy if you listen to that. I think they're like laughing and stuff. Hang on, what is that? Yep. I honestly don't always stop and listen to it this deeply, so sometimes I have interesting realizations because I guess I just wanted to keep playing for a second. Fixated on little parts of the songs that I like a lot, and I will just not focus on anything else. I'll just like pick into, oh, okay, this part of Paul's voice, listen to this, listen to this, listen to this, listen to this, and I'm just like, oh, this is heaven. I don't know. So sometimes I sound like I've never listened to a song. Was he saying quack or clap? Pretty sure that's quack. Quiet.
Pause. Pepperland. This is from George Martin's interview with Dr. Bob. I had a moviola installed in my office, my studio, and I made my own measurements. They gave me the reels as they came along. They were all higgledy-piggledy all over the place.
So obviously I'm going to associate these things so heavily with the movie that I do think this is a great opener, music-wise. Not knowing what the script is. He didn't know what was gonna go on. I don't think he may have known that. Yeah, he did know at this point. This first bit was the intro, I believe. But some of this, he didn't know what order things were going in. So it's kind of interesting how instinctive he was.
I'd have reel 4 one week and reel 7 the next, and then reel 6 and so on. And I would look at each reel and I knew which reels were which, and I had my script and I knew what we were doing, and I just wrote what came into my head. Really, that's what it amounted to. And we collected all the scores together, and at the end we just recorded it and hoped for the best. It seemed to work out okay.
I listened to this playlist so much so I'd have interesting shit to say, and I just don't. You're not gonna get offended if I put my hair up in a ponytail. I will get offended, but you guys won't, so... It definitely doesn't sound like it's his first rodeo doing this, but it is an animated film. He's new to this, and it is so great. This is a wonderful start, I think, for an animated film if you know it well. This is such a classical sound, but it's such a niche, unusual movie, especially for the times. So it's very cool.
He says, it certainly didn't turn out to be Mickey Mouse music, George. George says, well, again, working strictly to the film where you had this lovely, lovely land of brightness and color, and everybody is smiling and happy and butterflies floating around, and it was that kind of image that it was like a dream world, really.
That guitar right there, very interesting.
And it was slightly old-fashioned. All the people were wearing dresses that didn't seem too contemporary, but that fitted in with the dream. And so I thought that it needed a classical approach, and I didn't think it needed contemporary music. And I approached my score from that point of view, and I thought, well, I must convey a theme here that is lilting, that is light, that is classically orchestral, and something that gives a happy feeling at the end of it. And so, well, I guess that's all I tried to do, and the result was Pepperland. I don't know if it does or not, but that's what I tried.
Right there with, what is that, a flute? I don't know. I need to brush up. That's a clarinet, right? Tell me, guys, because it's been years and years. I need to go kind of brush up on what my instruments sound like here. I hear the flutes now, so that could have been an oboe. Sorry, I'm dumb. That's a very good reminder of what George Martin is capable of. This is the guy who also produces the Beatles, and I know that his role is minimized in the later years, and that's a different conversation. It can't take away that he can do this. Blue Meanies! March of the Meanies could be a real song to me. I like it. I would listen to this more on its own. If like pressed, I probably wouldn't choose to listen to these on my own. I'm being honest, but this one slaps. I like it.
March of the Meanies. This is a story that George Martin told in his book about Dick Lester, the director of A Hard Day's Night and Help, and why they didn't get along and why he wasn't involved in the second Beatles movie. Fun story, and I thought it would be a good thing we could all enjoy.
Come on now. Be real. Kind of slaps, right?
Dick Lester was the director, and I made special recordings with the Beatles of songs which were going into the film, producing them specifically with the film in mind. And I had to knit it all together and write the incidental music. That worked pretty well. What is more, whereas I had been disappointed that the film was to be in black and white, feeling that the first Beatles film ought to be in glamorous color, in the event that worked very well too.
Oh. Scary. Up in the ante.
Dick Lester's zany editing, and especially his experience in commercials, which enabled him to snap everything into tight, hard-packed little sequences, was excellent. The only trouble was that he was something of a musician himself. Oh, he's something of a scientist himself. Oh,
Harry tells me you're quite the science whiz. You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Goodbye. You know, like Phantom of the Opera, where he's like, Christine. It's like that a little bit. No, it's not. It's not. I know it's not.
Oh, we're starting out rough, guys. He is the sort of person who, at a nightclub or party, will go to the piano in the corner and play his idea of jazz to amuse people. He plays jazz.
I don't know what this...
George, really gives it to him. He says, he plays jazz piano tolerably well, and he gave me the impression that he considered me inferior to him musically. George Martin went like that.
This is when it's a little less vibey.
The adage that a little learning is a dangerous thing was borne out, and it led to a nasty split between us. There was one of my scores which he particularly disliked. That I wouldn't have minded, but he waited until the actual recording to tell me so. I was on the rostrum in front of the 32-piece orchestra when he came roaring up and tore me off a gigantic strip. "This is absolute rubbish you've written," he ranted. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You're a bloody fool. What do you call this? This crap." I was very embarrassed and very angry. This is what you asked me to write in the first place.
Clipping would make a fucking sample out of that. Woo! This is good shit. That sounds like a windstorm. I don't know if that's my Winnie the Pooh background. I'm an expert in all things Winnie the Pooh. My senior pictures had a series of photos of me surrounded by like 13 Poohs. I'm not trying to brag, but I'm awesome. And I also got that from my mom, including my hair. Thanks, Mom, for all the other things that you did for me. Like give me my hair and my Pooh Bear aficionados. Knowing that this is similar to the Blustery Day music, I think. If it's not, then I'm done.
I told him, but it did no good, and there ensued one of those stupid arguments which can benefit no one. So I did some quick revision there and then, and I recorded something along his new line of thinking. And after that, we were hardly on speaking terms. Yeah, I think I'd be pissed at him too.
Out first.
The irony was that when the film came out, the Americans gave it 2 Academy Award nominations. One was for the script by Alan Owen, and the other was for the musical direction by me. Dick got not a mention. There you go, George. Pop off, Queen. Perhaps it was poetic justice. It was also the only Oscar nomination I've had, but I didn't even go to the ceremony.
I love the winding, spiraling bits. That's an ending, right?
Where are your instruments?
Lost in the monstrous sea. Sea of monsters.
Sea of Time.
Such an eerie beginning to a song, but still very Beatle-y here. Jesus Christ, I'm so offended by that. Ew. I believe that this is the song that John criticizes, so we'll be listening to those fills, but I like this song.
So George to work on to help because, the girls were fighting. But he gets involved with Yellow Submarine, and it's unlike his other film experiences. He says, the other great problem was the speed at which the film was being made. A year from start to finish, compared with the minimum of 2 years that Disney always took to make a full-length animated feature. Normally, in the case of such a film, they like to score all the music first and then animate to that, as in the case of Fantasia, but with Yellow Submarine, that was just not possible. George Dunning, the director of Yellow Submarine, wanted, in the view of time allowed, to get writing and visualizing straight away. We had to work out a system by which I would work side by side with him and his team. He told me, we can't take time for you to write the music before we start, and we can't take time for you to write it when we finish, so the answer is that you'll have to write it while we're making the picture.
That is an interesting vibe. I need to know more about. I need to take like a course in music in order to speak the things in my head. To be fair, I tried to take music history. I wound up taking art history instead because I was immediately thrown in there. It wasn't music history. This guy was insisting on teaching us music theory, and it was stuff I didn't understand at all. He was like trying to have us harmonize the first day, and I was like, bitch, I can't sing. My voice doesn't work. Like my worst nightmare homework. He's like, altos, stand up. And I'm like, no. Oh, hard pass. It's been a long time since my mom was taking me to voice class.
Well, how on earth am I going to do that? I asked him. Well, I'll send you a reel at a time, and whenever a reel's near completion, you'll just have to write it and record it as quickly as you can. I haven't got time to consult with you where the music should go. You just write it where you think it should go, and we'll fit it in afterwards. It was nice enough to be given carte blanche like that, but it was an incredibly chaotic way to work. I might get reel 4 followed by reel 7, and even then there might be a couple of scenes missing, with a little notice on the reel to tell me how long the scene would be.
I did so many things growing up. I did ballet, I did tap, I swam competitively for 13 years. What y'all know about that?
I just think about how much fucking driving she had to do, taking me to like dance class and then swim. On like one night a week, she had to take me back for solo acting class. I thought that I was gonna be hot shit. Talk about a patient woman. Holy shit, I thought that I was gonna be so cool. I was like, I'm gonna be famous.
I spent a frantic month writing the music, 55 minutes of it in this haphazard way, and there was no room for mistakes. Everything had to be tailor-made to the picture. If a door opened or a funny face appeared in a window, those moments needed to be pointed up. It was the musical score that had to do the job. Luckily, one of my very earliest experiences in the world of film music had given me the tool to accomplish that. And he went on to talk about using a click chalk to mark emphasis in music.
You know who never thought that he was going to be famous, and here he is with all this stuff? Everybody should know this guy's name. This is very beautiful. It's very beautiful. It's very full. It has a good shift of timing, and you need that when you're furthering a story. And then obviously you have to change the mood when we're changing time. Confusion, weariness. You're not feeling that same confusion and weariness if you don't have this music shift. Have you ever watched a horror movie, like horror movie scenes? This is empty. I don't know why I'm holding it. I'm sure that there are YouTubers who like do this, but have you ever watched a horror movie scene without music in it? It's not nearly as frightening. And then this, what the hell? Very big change, but perfect for the movie. I think that this does capture that joyousness that George was talking about, or will be talking about. Sometimes some of this might be a little out of order, sorry. We'll get there. Oh, you know, John Lennon has great taste, so I'm not gonna shit on him for shitting on George. I don't know what kind of mood John was in that day when he said that. Sometimes he's sassy, but I vibe with this song. However, this is not the kind of music that the Beatles were listening to in 1968. I like this little
Relax, lads. Not a meanie inside.
Not even a teeny meanie. Not even a teeny weeny meanie.
Sea of Monsters. Wow, 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 wow. I like it.
We're continuing with George's book. He says, Yellow Submarine saw some pretty strange experiments too. In one sequence, in the Sea of Monsters, the Yellow Submarine is wandering around and all kinds of weird little things are crawling along the seafloor. Some with 3 legs, some rolling along.
Okay, so are you gonna listen to this on the radio? No. Are you going to listen to this on repeat? No. It's very good movie music. It's part of the, it's not pop music, it's classical. So spooky, honestly. That is very spooky. If I were growing up when Yellow Submarine came out, I didn't grow up watching it. I know that a lot of people did, but I didn't. I would have been spooked. I really like this because it almost gives you this vibe of falling, then brings the emphasis back up. So it's like a little less spooky here, right? And this stuff being on an album makes it so clearly a soundtrack. Stretching. Sorry, we're gonna keep it playing, but I'm gonna... That's spooky too. That is spooky. You know when you're a kid growing up and like some of those kid movies scare the crap out of you? For my mom, it was the Wicked Witch of the West or the East, whichever one is killed at the beginning. I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too. Like it scared the shit out of my mom. And still, she still was spooked by it. I was so scared of Ursula for just the longest time. Jafar never scared me because like, can we just be real? Jafar is just like a drag queen at this point. But the Beast of Fantasia and Ursula scared the crap out of me, and the music has so much to do with it. This is really showing humor, and it does show humor in the movie. George Martin really has these instincts that pick right up on where they're supposed to be.
Like bicycle balls, one monster is enormous, without arms but 2 long legs with Wellington boots on. It has a huge trunk with a head sticking out top of it, and in place of the nose there is a long trumpet. This is the sucking up monster, and when it sees other little monsters, it uses its trumpet to suck them up. Eventually, it sucks up the Yellow Submarine and finally gets a hold of the corner of the screen and sucks that up too until it all goes white. I felt, naturally, that the scene required special sucking up music. The question was how to do that with an orchestra. Suddenly, I hit upon obvious backwards music. Music played backwards sounds very odd anyway, and a trombone or cymbal played backwards sounds just like a sucking in noise. So I scored about 45 seconds of the orchestra to play in such a way that the music would fit the picture when we played it backwards. The engineer was working at CTS and at that time was a great character named Jack Clegg, and when I explained the idea to him, he said, "Lovely, great idea. I'll get the film turned around and you can record the music to the backward film. And then when we turn the film around the right way, your music will be backwards." And it sounded like something from a Goon script.
Tiny. Big loud.
We did that, and at the end of the take, instead of the usual yell for me to come in the control room, I heard Jack speaking onto the tape in some weird Japanese type language. I could hear this in my headphones and had no idea what was going on. And then when the time came to play the film back, when I hear what it sounded like, I understood. At the start of the take, you could hear Jack's voice saying something like Yellow Submarine tree. While we had been recording, he had carefully worked out what his announcement should be if he spoke it backwards, so that when he played it forwards, it would sound English. Well, roughly English. It was a very difficult thing to do, and we all fell about laughing, amazed, but full of congratulation when we heard it.
It works, right? Go back. Go back, you dumb bitch.
Sea of Holes. Guess who didn't listen to Sea of Holes for some reason? I don't know why. And I honestly, it is September 2nd. I'm going on vacation tomorrow. And yeah, I'm sorry, guys, but you're probably fine with me not filming it, sincerely. But here's the readings. I'm sorry. Continuing. George Martin says, "Once all the music had been recorded, we dubbed it onto film, and even then there was more messing about. In some places we cut out the music because the sound effects worked better. In others we eliminated the sound effects because what I had written sounded better. Yet, in spite of everything, that score proved enormously successful and earned me a load of fan mail. Jimmy Webb even asked me if he could use the opening Pepperland sequence for a Ringo Starr TV special in America. When it came to making the soundtrack album, which the producers wanted, there were more problems. The Beatles were still holding themselves remote from the whole enterprise and simply left us to our own devices. So I told the film people, obviously, the thing to do is to let the Beatles issue whatever they want of their own songs. I'll issue my stuff separately because I don't want to write on their backs." Here's what John said. "Brian made a mistake by letting George Martin put in all those films in Submarine, the Sea of Holes shit. He recorded all of this terrible shit that went out with our LP, you know. If you check it out, it's a whole sort of joke. George Martin is on one side of our album. Oh, we didn't notice."
You look what I found. It's the uniforms.
Hey, nice bit of gear, that.
Pepperland Laid Flat.
Sorry. Sorry, I wasn't trying to not listen, I was listening. Very eerie entrance, but once again, this is not like a song you'd listen to. This is still like commentary on the illustrations or the animation. I feel like this is where the song almost starts, not that. That's 20 seconds.
George Martin says, "The Beatles decided to issue an EP of their 4 new songs from the film. For their part, the film people wanted me to put out an LP of the background score with voices from the film and the narration. This was to tell the story of Yellow Submarine and was to be assembled by the man who had written the original story, Eric Siegel."
But even this, it's almost like, but what is my definition of a song, right? Come on now, me being pretentious like I know shit. Ignore me, come on. I know.
Later, to make his name and find fame with Love Story, I had worked very closely with him on the script of the film, and the record was to be a combination of words and music, rather like Peter and the Wolf. We were about to start to work on that when the Beatles suddenly changed their collective mind and said, "No, we don't want to do that. We want to have an LP."
Ooh, I like that. Is that a theremin?
What they realized, of course, was that EPs didn't sell in America while LPs did. What's more, they probably realized that in spite of their lack of interest or cooperation, the film was likely to be the success it eventually proved to be.
Oh, I like that frill. That's pretty. Sorry, I'm stretching. Ignore me.
So it was decided that the album should have their music on one side and mine on the other. To their 4 new songs, they added Yellow Submarine, which had originally been a single, and All You Need Is Love. On my side, there were Pepperland, Sea of Time, Sea of Holes, Sea of Monsters, March of the Meanies, Pepperland Laid Waste, and Yellow Submarine in Pepperland, all of which I re-recorded. It was more convenient to do so, and no more costly since the original orchestra would have had to be paid twice anyway if we had used the soundtrack for the record. The success of Yellow Submarine soon paid dividends for me. Out of the blue, a film director named Mike Hodges rang up Shirley Burns, my long-suffering assistant, and asked, "Can I come and see George Martin?" He appeared in my office, told me that he was making a film in Malta with Michael Caine, and asked me if I would like to do the music. To be truthful, I was astonished.
Very Alice.
There are many writers who do nothing but film music, I said. When I get to write film music, it's generally to orchestrate a song that Paul McCartney's written or in some connection like that. Why have you chosen me? And he says, "I think your Yellow Submarine was the best thing I've heard in ages. That's why I want you to do the music for my picture." "Well, thanks. It's lovely of you to say that. I hope I can justify your faith," I said.
I feel like we could have done without this one. Like if we're picking songs for an album, right? But I understand why it would go on there. This is how we're ending the album. Okay, and finally, this is the last song. That's kind of exciting. That's kind of energetic. Bum, 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 ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Yeah! Now that is something a cowboy can get behind. In this case, I'm the cowboy. Well, sue me is fine. Yeah, arrest me. I'm so stupid. Guys, I'm dumb. I'm dumb. Ugh. Dun, dun. I vibe with this one. Actually, I vibe with this one just as much as the Meanies, maybe more. You heard me right here first. I'm losing it. We all know I'm losing it. Like, cut back once again, that was a very real shake. And then I go on to say, ba-na-na-na. Ooh, that's pretty too. This is very atmospheric and very narrative, I think. I think that this is very good because it takes obviously the theme of the namesake of the movie and makes it this big, beautiful orchestration, and it gives us an overall collective feeling. That's a good ending for an album. And plus, that's just a little cheeky, a little funny, a little meanie. Yeah! Woo! Honestly, I vibe with this so hard. I think that this is a jam. I don't care. I don't care. Dun, 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 dun. Yes. And it is time for It's All Too Much, which is an incredibly long song.
Hey, that's a funny place to leave a goldfish pond.
Yes. And it is time for It's All Too Much, which is an incredibly long song, and it was cut. I think I talk about that. 6 minutes and 26 seconds. I love this song. I even love this. I love the waviness and the unexpected start of this song. You do not know where we're going at all, which is sometimes part of the Beatles music. It fits in with with the White Album being a recent release. I mean, post Revolver, I think we'd be comfy with something like this. But 12 seconds, even for the Beatles, it's kind of weird because it's almost getting less structured.
I'm gonna let other me introduce my feelings on this song. This is from All the Songs. George wrote It's All Too Much to share his visions under the influence of LSD. Lyrics and music had little sense of direction, said George. I just wanted to write a rock and roll song about the whole psychedelic thing of the time. Later, George reworked this song to later affirm that only meditation and not drugs offered a real answer. It's All Too Much was written in a childlike manner from realization that appeared during and after some LSD experiences and which were later confirmed in meditation.
Okay, oh, thank God it's a song. Whew, it got close there. This sounds like cotton candy and church.
The result is a bit chaotic. George seems to be seeking himself, but without any clear direction. In his text, he alludes to the Mercy's 1966 Sorrow, with your long blonde hair and your eyes of blue, while also referring to his own wife. In the end of the coda, one of the trumpeters perform a short segment from Jeremiah Clark's Prince of Denmark March. The entire piece is dominated by an enormous, saturated guitar sound, certainly influenced by the Beatles' idol, Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, hell yeah. Good claps. Good claps. I don't know what I'm doing here. I just like it a lot.
They began recording at Delaney in London. We're not going back there, which was used by Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, Deep Purple, and Led Zeppelin. The rhythm track of the working title, Too Much, was completed on May 25th in 4 takes with George on Hammond organ.
The amount of layers in this fucks me up.
By the way, I know a bunch of these things have dates without years. I didn't catch it, and I should have, and I didn't, and I'm not going back to fix it. It's either 66, 67, 68. Okay? I'm pretty sure. You know, I think maybe one of them was 65. You know, 60. I'm tired. We had Revolver songs on it, so 65. You know what I'm saying? You guys know what I'm saying. I'm sorry.
I'll be right back. Something's going on with my ear, and this is not going to go well if something's going on with my ear.
The rhythm track of the working title was completed on May 25th in 4 takes with George on Hammond organ, Paul on bass, Ringo on drums, and John probably at the guitar. On May 31st, they returned to Delaney Studios.
It's kind of hard to say. It's not hard to say.
Adding a series of overdubs with George as lead vocal, John and Paul's backing vocals, which deviated a little in the coda with the chant Too Much becoming tuba, hand claps, tambourine, cowbell, various percussion instruments, and certainly a lead guitar played by George, who added a lot of vibrato in the style of Hendrix.
I do have a lot of commentary regarding this song, as in I'm reading a bunch. So if I might not be reacting as much musically, it's because I was reading something that I think is very significant. And the words that I'm reading, I think would be okay, just always cutting myself off, would be interesting to bear in mind while listening to this song. So maybe less reactions, but who knows with me.
For the next session on June 2nd, George Martin, back from vacation and resuming his function as producer, added 4 trumpets and a bass clarinet. David Mason, the trumpeter who performed on Penny Lane, remembers that George did not really know what he wanted. Finally, several instruments, including a clarinet, colored the piece in the Pepper style, and the final mixes were made over a year later at Abbey Road on October 16th, 1968. So originally, it was recorded in 1967. There's the answer right there. Using ADT extensively on hand claps and vocals.
I love a good hand clap. There's hand claps, right? I have to check or else I'm gonna get fucked up. Gotta check or gonna get fucked up. If I ever misspeak on stuff. Yeah. It's Paul, John, and George.
Here's Richard Sheffield's from the Rolling Stone. Lovely take on It's All Too Much. My money's on It's All Too Much as the Great Lost Beatles song, the one that deserves to be infinitely more famous than it is. One of the all-time great psychedelic guitar freakouts. None of the Beatles thought it was anything special, but they were so wrong. It's where they really nailed the Sgt. Pepper sound, that combination of acid rock momentum and quaint brass band frippery.
I like that all around. Everywhere is birthday cake, so take a piece but not too much. It's like, remember that you can enjoy it, but don't take other people's birthday cake. At least that's how I would interpret it. I'm smart, remember?
It's All Too Much would have been the second or third best song on Sgt. Pepper, but alas, they recorded it in May 1967, just a couple months late. All 4 write a solid Ringo groove for 8 minutes. All 4 sound ferocious. It proves they could jam, even though they couldn't. They just accidentally pulled it off here.
That goes hard. Damn.
Even George, so touchy about not getting his due as a songwriter, didn't regard it as more than a candy-colored title.
Oh. However they mixed that's awesome. I love it. It sounds awesome. That keeps it from being so traditional. Once again, getting away from tradition by adding the Beatles 11 herbs and spices, if you will.
The effusive 8-minute jam got trimmed down to 6.5 minutes on Yellow Submarine soundtrack to fill out the half-assed piece of movie merch. They decided it was too minor to include on Magical Mystery Tour, which means that they rated it below Flying or Blue Jay, which is insane. And I love both of those songs a lot, but not... It's better than Flying. And I like instrumentals. Da, na, 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 na.
And then as it slows down, the guitar goes down. George's voice stays mystical and mythical, in my opinion. He's so weird in such a good way. He's just fucking weird. He's so weird. He's talking about LSD and also, in my opinion, Patty. He's like, yeah, so take me everywhere. Let's look at all this shit and then let's get home for tea. We need tea. And believe it or not, that is a little bit George. He does have some fuss in him. I'm sorry. That's gonna get me canceled. Isn't that gonna... Ooh, sorry. Now it's a Beatles song. Thanks, Paul, for joining in.
He goes on to say, it's a psychedelic love song with George dazed by the hippie minx on his futon. More than any other George song, it sounds like it's his tribute to Patty Boyd, the puffy-lipped sex priestess he married. In later years, she adopted the spelling Patty, P-A-T-T-I-E. He goes on to spell it P-A-T-T-I, which drives me crazy, because if she adopted the spelling Patty, then that's how she wants it spelled. So spell it right, you dumb fuck. That's incorrect. Sorry, got mad. Okay. My cat's banging at the door, but I'm finishing this because I'm close.
Yes. I love this song this whole time, but the way that George has it pick up and become so full here.
He said that the words get drippy, all the world is birthday cake, in the baked attitude of MacArthur Park, but he has no shame because he's soaring on Patty's mind-exploring hallucinatory impact, reviving his too much motif from You Like Me Too Much. It's a George song about making out, which is a rarity to say the least. Patty is one of rock and roll's most legendary muses. She was born to stir the songwriting juices of helplessly doting guitar boys. She became the blondest corner of rock's most famous love triangle. Okay, we're gonna skip. It's All Too Much has been the greatest love song she ever coaxed into being. Only she could have turned such reserved English gents into such tormented soul men. In 60s photos, George looks much happier when he's standing next to her.
Dang! It sounds good. And I think even though I talk about how maybe like unencumbered the Beatles were with this project, they just did not care. It's clear that when they were making a lot of these songs, especially with the variety of the songs that I chose, they were working on the songs. It wasn't just their scraps. I mean, John wanted to be, suspended from the ceiling during Yellow Submarine. There's a lot more to it, always. Even though it's the scraps, it's like, damn, once again, can we remind everybody of the rubric?
As usual, your B is another person's A.
As always, your B is another person's A.
The Savoyest of truffles. I love their wedding photos, especially the ones where the blushing bride stands between George and his best man and a cheery-looking Brian Epstein. Brian and George reach around her for an awkward handshake. George beams in Patty's radiance. The smile on his face says, "This... baby, this is why a boy from Liverpool learns to play guitar. This is why you learn to sit down and practice those chords." So I always hear It's All Too Much as his ode to Patty. Maybe that's why he had mixed feelings about it.
It's all too much. I love this. The whole time, the horns, to me, haven't really felt like specifically peppery when listening to it on its own. Peppery as in, my God, oh my God, not Sgt. Pepper. Well, a little bit, but I'm talking about like Pepperland music, the George Martin instrumental songs on this album. That's what I'm saying when I say peppery, but this part does, but it's not bad. And then the Beatle part continues to grow and flourish. This is so good. Oh my God.
He gets carried away with the whole band picking up a pheromone contact high. Patty got him into the Maharishi. He became a devotee after she and George visited India together. She was the worldliest of the 4 Beatles' first wives, the one who wasn't pregnant at the wedding. She's also the one who went to snag another rock star. There's a great photo where she and George exit the courthouse after the cops raided their pad on a trumped-up pop bust. She looks glossier walking out of a police station than most stars look on their finest day. By sheer coincidence, this bust happened the day Paul married Linda, which is a very fun and true fact.
Ooh, it's a mess, and it's such a good mess. All the complaints about this song, I hate them. What are you talking about? Same with Only a Northern Song, but especially this one.
You look at the photos, Paul and Linda on one side of town, George and Patty on the other, and it's hard to tell which couple is having a groovier time. When Patty and Clapton got married in May 1979, George, Paul, and Ringo jammed at the wedding, and also...
That is about Patty. I don't care what you say. Inspirations abound, but that's about Patty. And feel it. Feel this.
They got married because of a bet that Eric wanted to fucking win, so he tricked Patty into marrying her. He had no plans to marry her, and they were broken up when he proposed to her. He didn't propose to her himself. He sent somebody else to do it for him. I do not like that man.
You're too much. And she is, really. I mean, oh my God. Ugh. I have a back-breaking crush on that woman. I make music for her too.
Going forward, playing Get Back and Sgt. Pepper. John called Clapton to complain that he hadn't been invited. It's strange how George was always a little stingy with the love songs. When you've got Patty sharing your stash box and leaving her sandals under your bed, yet you'd rather write all your songs about Lord Krishna, you can't blame the girl for getting restless. It's understandable she would upgrade her muse glimmer with some other rock star, preferably your best friend. No doubt Patty did it all for the songs. We owe her so much.
Oh, it's not just the song, it's the production, the way things are being brought up, whatever the insistence of making things the way that they are, it is just so too much.
I cry a lot in my videos, and I didn't cry when I was listening to this the first time, or reacting to it, I mean. I'm listening to it now, and it's just... I'm just editing it. And this song is gorgeous. I mean, I don't understand how to verbalize what music can the emotions that music can. I don't know how to say what I'm thinking. It's just, things were so bad for the Beatles. Like, at this point, things were not good with them. But when you hear Paul and George together and they're singing about love and... It's all too much. I don't care that I'm a fucking cornball. It's too much. Patty is the love of my life. I know lots about her. She definitely didn't do it all for the songs. That is a very stupid way of putting it, but I love this description. I think it is the beautiful, the great love song. Something means a lot to me, but It's All Too Much is a better love song for sure.
And then there's this weird moo under there. It's like, damn, what is that? I'm not mad about it.
It definitely can bring up big feelings inside. Well, I'm gonna go get some cough drops and then I'll be back to listen.
I love the ad-libs back here. I love all of that. It's just so well placed. It's very good. It's very Beatle-y, you know, and I love that. It's weird. It's really weird. Such a traditional ending to a song. That's great.
John, beating lightly.
John, I like it. I still feel really torn about it though. Is it an album? Sure, yeah, it is sold as an album. It's sold as an LP or an EP or whatever, guys. I'm American. I'm still trying to figure things out and I'm very tired. It's the 10th studio album. It's categorized as a studio album / soundtrack by the Beatles and film score by George Martin on Wikipedia. I don't know exactly how it was categorized back then. I didn't see anything like that, so whatever. I ask repeatedly why, and the answer is because it was is a contractual obligation. It's part of the film project. It's what they do. They do an album and a movie. You know, that's what gives the movie the clout, is that the album's coming. That's why. But is it an album as in it's sold as an album? Yes. Does it count? I don't know. I feel I'm not the person to answer that, but will I listen to it on its own now? No, I'm not going to.
I said what I said. Heal from it or move on.
I have all these songs independently on separate playlists. If I'm like really feeling it, then I'll go listen to it, but it's definitely not on my short list for where do we put Yellow Submarine? What do we do with Yellow Submarine? What the fuck is that? It doesn't mean that George Martin doesn't deserve his flowers or that we shouldn't praise the music or that we don't like the songs individually, but it's still like a mystery to me about where I should categorize or put this album, because the songs themselves, the Beatles songs, good, like them. Great. Buying a soundtrack is not for everybody. The soundtrack aspect is a pretty big turnoff for the basic consumer. Does that make it less of an album? No, but it's still iffy. So I don't think I'm the one to make that call because it is Beatles music, so therefore it is a Beatles album. But it feels weird. It still feels weird. So this is me saying, I don't know. That's the answer. The answer is I don't know. Sorry, that's the best you're gonna get. But once again, I enjoyed this album and this movie apparently long enough to be working on it for damn near, no, actually 3 months as of yesterday. But I know that it gets a lot of criticism and a lot of hate, and I would love to hear what you guys think. It's time to let this puppy go for me. It's time to move on to something else and just let it go, let it be. But anyway, please like and subscribe, comment if you're nasty or if you're fancy, either way. Consider supporting me on Patreon, patreon.com/LarsLand to get all of my... I know that this is completely shocking, but the Patreon version is literally an hour longer. So it might be worth checking out, even though this turned out being distinctly different. So good stuff. My videos as God intended, without restrictions and a lot of other insanity. But most importantly, it doesn't matter because y'all are here in my land no matter what. And I love y'all so much. And y'all come back now, you hear. Bye.
My sweet Lord. My Lord. My Lord. But it takes so long, my Lord. My sweet Lord.